Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the move of What If Deku Met the King of the Underworld? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. The first time he falls into the underworld, he's trying to save a girl from drowning. He manages to get her on the shore, but gets pulled away down the river himself. Izuku is a demigod. His mother had a relationship with a god when she was young, and when he left, she stopped talking about him at all. However, it seems Izuku didn't inherit too much power from his father because the only thing he can do is make flowers and trees grow. Sometimes it's useful though, and he would have used it in that moment to return to the shore, but a rock hit his head before he could even think about it. And now he's in the underworld. He's never been there, but he's heard mortals speak about it quite often not to recognize it. He already misses his mother, but supposes there's nothing he can do about it. He looks around just to make sure the girl is not there. At least he managed to help her after all. Realizing he's still soaking wet and that his head hurts, he walks barefoot in that tunnel. It's dark, but there are plenty of torches to light up his way. There's a line of people that ends in front of a dock. It seems like they're waiting for a ship to arrive. Izuku wants to keep exploring the place, but he supposes he should be waiting in line as well. "What's your name, cutie?" Suddenly, a girl with beautiful pink hair and skin appears next to him. She's carrying a black book in her hands and reading down as if she's looking for something. "Midoriya Izuku," he mumbles, eyes glimmering with excitement and curiosity. He tries to control his own voice though. "Sorry, cutie, but this is not your time," she winks before grabbing him by the arm and pulling him away from the line of people. "Besides, your soul is still clearly attached to your physical body, and that's why you're still feeling everything that happens up there." Izuku touches his wet hair and realizes he's freezing, although he doesn't feel like he's drowning anymore. Perhaps he's on the shore. "What's your name?" "Ashido Mina." She smiles again, pleased for some reason. "What should I do now, Ashido? Why don't you help me here while you wait for your soul to return to your body?" "Of course." Izuku beams, already walking behind her. He's desperate to learn how everything works down there. They go through the line asking their names and sometimes listening to their stories. Some of them make Izuku tear up, so he starts making flowers crowns so they smile before boarding their respective ships. "So you're not completely mortal, I see," Ashido mumbles with curiosity. "Oh, I'm a demigod, a minor deity I suppose," Izuku mumbles, looking at his hands. "I didn't even know my power still worked here." "Ashido, why are the souls wearing shitty flowers crowns?" The man yelling looks very young. He's blonde with spiky hair. He's wearing dark cloak and even darker clothes underneath. "They're not shitty," Izuku protests then, offended. When the other gets closer, he realizes he's way taller and stronger than him. "I made the best for them." "Ha!" Finally, the blonde notices him, looking down at him like he's some sort of irritating thing he's stumbled upon. "Who are you?" "I'm Midoriya Izuku." "What's your name?" "You don't know who I am?" The other huffs, looking offended. He's a lost soul waiting to go back to his body. "Of course he doesn't know you, Bakugo," Ashido mumbles, trying to hide her amusement. Then, looking at Izuku, she adds, "He's the king of the underworld." "Really?" Izuku forgets his irritation and gets closer to the confused god. He starts beaming. "Oh, so what kind of powers do you have? I mean, I suppose you can move from one place to another whenever you want, but how does that work exactly? Do you visit the mortal realm often? Do mortals see you? Why do you—" "Stop babbling, nerd." Bakugo narrows his eyes, getting irritated. "I can't understand anything." "Sorry, that usually happens when I get excited." Izuku scratches his left cheek, feeling a little bit embarrassed. "I can't help it, everything here is so interesting." Suddenly, Bakugo's expression softens. Then, his eyes roam all over Izuku's body. "You're soaking wet?" "I was drowning, Baku." "That sounds horrible coming from you." "Don't call me that. Call me Katsuki." "Kaken?" Izuku can't listen to him very well now. He feels a pull. He's going back. "No. Katsuki." "Honestly, duh?" He finally goes back to the mortal world. The girl he saved pulled him out of the river. Her name is Uraraka Ochako. Thanks for saving me. It looks like we saved each other, Midoriya. The next couple of times he doesn't appear at the docks, but inside of a castle, usually in the throne room. He's not sure why, but he doesn't mind actually. He likes to explore everything and the castle is absolutely fascinating. There he meets Kirishima and Kaminari, another minor deities like himself that help Bakugo rule the underworld. They're always so nice to him. However, Bakugo doesn't like when finds him chatting with them and usually carries him over his shoulder and sits him over one of the armrests of the throne. Fortunately, the seat is very large for Izuku to sit comfortably. The king assures him he's very annoying, but he listens to whatever Izuku has to say and answers to each and every one of his questions. One time he ends up almost freezing to death in the top of a mountain because he was trying to save a boy, and when he's back in the underworld, he can still feel the cold spreading through his bones. Bakugo rolls his eyes. You truly are a minor deity, can't even resist a little bit of cold? Izuku pouts, prompting the king to chuckle before he puts his own black cloak over the young man's shoulders. It works for some reason. Perhaps it's just because Bakugo can control everything that happens inside his realm. Thank you, Kaken. I just did it because somehow you're even more annoying when you're cold, Deku. The next time he doesn't feel anything and he knows that he's about to die for real. He's glad because the pain he was feeling up there was unbearable. Oi, de. Shitty Hair says that. What is it? Bakugo stops smirking the moment he notices Izuku's tired expression. He helps him climb up the throne and doesn't say anything when the green-haired boy leans to rest his head over the king's shoulder. I don't want to talk about it, he mumbles, but that only increases Bakugo's concern. Ashido, bring me the book. The girl appears suddenly and hands Bakugo the book. She must have read it before because she keeps eyeing Izuku with worry in her yellow eyes. Letter by letter his name starts being written in dark green ink. So I guess I should head to the docks now, right? I don't want to miss my ship. Stay, you can board it later, Bakugo mumbles, looking back at him with concern and something else Izuku can't recognize. He puts a hand on his knee like he wants to keep him there, next to him. Really? I thought if you lost your ship you couldn't board it again. And you'd have to stay here forever. Things change, nerd. Bakugo, you shouldn't? Shut up, Pinky. He snaps at her, cheeks turning slightly pink. Before he turns his head to look at Izuku again. Tell me what happened? He feels the pain or perhaps just the memory of it. It's like the horn of the creature is piercing into his stomach again. But then the name in the book vanishes and he doubles over in pain before he sees the blood. Deku! Bakugo screams, pulling the young man closer to him. Izuku has never seen him so desperate before. He looks like he's panicking. What happened? The Minotaur tried to kidnap a woman. I had to do something. A Minotaur? Are you crazy? Bakugo is angry, but Izuku can tell he's not actually mad at him. Can you make the pain stop? I can't anymore, please. Just end my life already. I don't want more pain, he sobs. Perhaps he wouldn't have made an effort to go back if the woman was still in danger, but he remembers she managed to get away. Which was the reason why the Minotaur got so mad at him in the first place. Suddenly, everything goes black for a moment and the next thing he knows is that he's back in the mortal realm. Back in his body, bleeding over the beautiful flowers he was making grow before everything happened. But he's not alone. Bakugo kneels next to him and starts healing his wounds using only his palms. Izuku feels heat coming from them in waves, well, more like tiny, harmless explosions. The pain and the wounds vanish in the blink of an eye. How? I can even bring something back to life if I want to, Bakugo mumbles absent-mindedly. He's too used to answering Izuku's questions he doesn't even think before doing it. But I'm not supposed to. Thank you, Kaken. The king doesn't smile though. Instead he strokes Izuku's cheek before he rises up. I'll be right back. He disappears in black smoke, like the one usually an explosion leaves behind. When he returns, there's still fury written all over his features. His cloak is tainted with blood and his hands covered in it. He truly looks like the king of the dead in that moment. Don't come back to the underworld, he hisses, hands closing into fists at his sides. Do you understand? Stop risking your life like this. I don't want to see you ever again, Deku. A couple of tears fall from his eyes when Bakugo leaves. He's never felt so lonely before. The ache in his heart disappears when he meets Todoroki Shoto, the son of one of the most powerful gods, the one who mortals claim can control the sun itself. He doesn't like to talk about his father though, and Izuku doesn't actually care about that. He just likes to spend time with his new friend, and since the man with mismatched hair insists on being with him most of the time, he ends up saving Izuku's life more than once. It seems Bakugo's wish came true after all, because thanks to Todoroki, Izuku stops visiting the Underworld. Perhaps it's for the best. He doesn't really belong there anyway, and it seems it's not time for him to die yet. Thank you, Todoroki, he mumbles again before pulling his friend into a tight embrace. You're welcome, the young man mumbles, turning bright red. For a moment Izuku thinks the hug is making him uncomfortable and he tries to move away, but Todoroki pulls him right back into his arms and hugs him like he doesn't want to let go. They're so beautiful. Izuku grins from ear to ear, watching as Todoroki makes pretty, tiny snow crystals with his right hand. He calls them snowflakes. One of the nicest things about his friend is that he never gets irritated when he starts asking questions or babbling about his powers. You can control the weather, right? In a way, Todoroki nods, lips quirking into a soft smile. I can increase or decrease the temperature. But I also can make snow or produce fire with my left hand. But fire is my father's power, so I rather not. Izuku, who's heard a lot about the sun god and everything he's done to his youngest son, knows he must say something. He'd hate to see Todoroki not to reach his full potential just because he doesn't want to follow his father's steps. You are not him. He cuts him off, narrowing his eyes fiercely. The power is yours. Using it will not turn you into your father. You're kind and for some reason don't get tired of my ramblings or... I'll never get tired of you, Izuku, Todoroki says with the same fierce determination the other boy had just a couple of minutes ago. I want to be with you. Me too, Todoroki. Please. Just call me Shoto, he mumbles, putting a hand on Izuku's cheek gently. Tell me more about your power, Shoto. He chuckles, not noticing the way the young god is looking at him. He's more focused thinking about changing the topic, because even though it's important for him to let Todoroki know he's not his father, he knows his friend hates talking about him. You mentioned emotions had an effect on it. It's easier for me to use my right side if I'm sad, he admits. Although it doesn't mean I can't use it at all when I'm happy, it's just more powerful when I'm not content. Are you sad right now? Izuku asks with curiosity and a little bit of concern. What if it was his fault for mentioning Todoroki's father? Todoroki chuckles, like he just said something funny. Izuku is not sure what's so amusing, but if it makes Todoroki smile he doesn't really mind. I'm always happy when I'm with you, Izuku. It seems that Todoroki wants to say something else because after he intertwines their fingers together he adds, when I was younger I missed my mother a lot and sometimes the areas around me got covered in layers and layers of snow. I couldn't control it. Izuku looks around the field, his field, and imagines it white. He knows it'd look beautiful, but at the same time intimidating. Flowers die under cold temperatures, the trees lose their leaves and the mortals lose their crops because of it. Todoroki must be thinking something similar because he suddenly looks guilty. Hey, it's all right. It wasn't your fault, you couldn't control it. Izuku smiles kindly at him before rubbing their noses together, prompting the young god to blush to the tip of his ears, although he doesn't move from where he is. I still can't control it, but I'm not. I'm really happy right now, he admits shyly, scratching the right side of his face. Izuku doesn't know why he looks so flustered suddenly. I really like you, Izuku. I like you too, the green-haired boy says, putting his arms around the other. He's glad to have such a good friend. Someone that really wants to be his friend. It's okay, Izuku thinks as he shakes his head. Bakugo was probably right. He was causing him many problems. Besides, it's probably not usual for someone to be constantly almost dying. Are you okay? Todoroki asks, running his fingers through Izuku's hair, looking at him with concern. Of course I am. Careful, Todoroki catches him, grabbing him by the waist before Izuku falls into the river. He's lost count of how many times he's saved him in the last few weeks. You don't want to make a trip to the Underworld. Actually, Izuku blushes with embarrassment, sitting on the ground next to his friend as he rubs the back of his neck. I've been there a couple of times already. As worry falls all over his features like a shadow, Todoroki frowns before cradling Izuku's face in his hands and looks at him like he wants to find some kind of wound on his body. That means you almost died. Every single time. Something like that, he mumbles, blush spreading down his neck. A nice place, I made friends there. Please don't do that again. Izuku. I'll be more careful, he promises with a nod. He wants to tell him that it's mostly thanks to him that he's not gotten hurt lately, but then, they see a cloud of dark smoke before a pink girl appears in front of them. Ashido. Izuku beams at her. It's been a while. I didn't know you could come here as well. I can't, she mumbles, looking almost distressed. Only for very special and urgent matters. He doesn't know I'm here. But this is important, Midoriya. I know it's not like you can risk your life to pay him a visit every time, but there are other ways to go to the underworld. Please come. He's not himself. Ashido must not know Bakugo is the one who doesn't want to see him again. Izuku is about to explain that to her, when Todoroki takes a few steps forward and puts himself in the middle of the two. It's okay, Shoto. She's my friend. She comes from the underworld. I don't want her to take you away. She won't, Izuku assures him, putting a calming hand over the other's shoulder. Ashido looks from one to the other and somehow her distress grows even more. Are you Endeavor's son? Unfortunately. You're a powerful god, she mumbles. It's not a question. It's too late. You're not taking him. I won't let you. I'm not. I would never hurt Midoriya, if that's what you're afraid of, Ashido mumbles. But Bakugo needs to see. There must be something on Todoroki's face at the moment because she stops talking. I remember I have to do something. By Midoriya. Wait. By the time Izuku takes a step forward it's too late, she's gone. He really wants to know what's the other way to go to Underworld. But, if Bakugo doesn't want to see him, are you alright, Izuku? Todoroki asks, grabbing his chin gently to make him look back at him. Yes. I told you she's a friend. Well, she's not my friend, I can't trust her. I need to protect you. I'm fine. You worry too much. Todoroki shakes his head before pulling Izuku into his arms. You don't understand? If I lose you, he bites his bottom lip to stop himself from saying more. Then he sighs, looking almost scared. I can't lose you. You won't. It's been a couple of days since Todoroki paid him a visit. He had told Izuku he was going to be busy because his father wanted him at his side, and although Izuku understands, that doesn't mean he doesn't miss him. However, Izuku decides that it's best to start his daily activities and begins to check on his plants and flowers. He helps the ones that look a little bit sad or weak and adds a few more in places that need a little bit more of color. A couple of mortals pass by, but they don't pay too much attention to him. Sometimes they think he's one of them, perhaps that's because he looks a lot like his mother. Izuku realizes he misses all the adventures he had when he was constantly looking for people to save, but he promised Todoroki he wasn't going to do anything risky while the young god was away. He lies down for a while after he finishes his tasks and can't help falling asleep right there. When he wakes up, Izuku finds himself surrounded by black smoke. He gets scared for his plants, but he doesn't have time to do anything because suddenly someone takes him in their arms and starts carrying him over their shoulder. Wait. Shut up, Dad. It's me. Kaken? Izuku relaxes as soon as he recognizes the black and orange robes and the spiky blonde hair. What? Where are we going? Back to the underworld, obviously. Bakugo huffs. Even though he can't see him, Izuku can tell he's rolling his eyes. The cloud of smoke surrounds them, the sound of an explosion follows, and in the blink of an eye they're back in the place Izuku has never been able to forget. Does that mean I'm really dead this time? He mumbles, lamenting he didn't have time to say goodbye to his mother or Todoroki. There's a pause, it's just a couple of seconds, but it worries Izuku a little bit. Obviously, the king of the underworld mumbles, although there's a bit of hesitation in his tone. When they're back in the castle and Izuku is finally on his feet again, he remembers the reason why he's been so careful these past months is because Bakugo didn't want him there. Well, he probably still doesn't. Midoriya. Kaminari and Kirishima jump into his arms and Izuku hugs them close to his body because he must admit that he really missed them too. They stop the group hug when Bakugo growls. "What are you doing here?" Kaminari asks, looking a little bit confused. "What do you mean?" "He's dead," Bakugo tells them before Izuku can even open his mouth to speak. Kirishima looks from Izuku to Bakugo with a little bit of concern. "I see. I won't be here for long, I promise," Izuku mumbles then. "I know Kaken doesn't actually want me here, so I'll probably take the next boat. That's what I have to do, He gets cut off when Bakugo takes him in his arms, sits on his throne and secures Izuku on his lap to look at him directly in the eyes. There's a slight blush on his cheeks, he looks almost ashamed. "I'm sorry about what I said that day," the king mumbles. Izuku is too surprised to speak, but Kaminari is not, so he says something under his breath after gasping out loud. "It's alright, Kaken. I like to have you here, Deku," Bakugo says, looking a little bit more vulnerable. He cradles Izuku's face in his hands gently. "Stay here? But I thought I had to board a ship?" "You don't have to, please stay." Izuku blinks a couple of times, hearing Bakugo say please surprises him a lot. "Alright. I'm glad we're still friends." Bakugo pulls him even closer and starts stroking his messy, green curls with his fingers. "About that, I'd like to be more than—" "What have you done?" Ashido appears, she's holding the black book against her chest and looking from Izuku to Bakugo like something terrible has happened. "Shut up, Pinky. I have everything under control." "But he's not." Deku belongs in the underworld, Bakugo almost growls, cradling Izuku in his arms protectively, confusing him even more. "So he'll stay here. I hope Shoto is okay with?" "Don't mention his name here," Bakugo hisses, prompting Izuku to blink in shock. He had no idea he didn't like the other god. "Todoroki, I had forgotten about him." Ashido shivers before taking a deep breath and narrowing her eyes at Bakugo. "You have no idea the trouble you're in." "I can handle it, Pinky." She looks like she's not sure about that. "This is going to be your room from now on," Bakugo mumbles, opening the door that leads to a bedroom that's bigger than the house Izuku used to live in with his mortal mother. He needs to ask Bakugo later if he can send her a message somehow to let her know he's alright. "Are you sure?" "This is too much for me." Izuku knows that time doesn't matter anymore and that, according to Bakugo, he can stay as long as he wants before he decides to board the ship that will take him to the place he needs to be. So he supposes there's no rush. He feels a gentle hand on the back of his neck before he actually turns around to look up at Bakugo, who's smirking triumphantly now. "You belong in here, Da?" Izuku is not sure about that, but he decides not to argue with his friend. Instead, his curiosity makes him rush towards another closed door at the other side of the room. Where does it lead to? Suddenly, there's a slight blush spreading all over Bakugo's cheeks. He clears his throat and looks away for a moment. "To my bedroom?" Oh. Izuku has never seen something like that. Would someone need to build another door that leads to other bedroom? "It's okay. I'm not going to open it, nerd. Don't worry. But if you need me..." Izuku is even more puzzled by Bakugo's reaction. He looks flustered. "These are the queen's chambers." Ashido walks in with a mischievous smirk on her face. Bakugo glares at her like he wants to kill her. "Shut up." "Really? This is the room for..." Izuku looks around, eyes absorbing all the luxury in before he comes to the conclusion that it is indeed a place for someone of royal blood. "Maybe I should stay somewhere else." "No." Bakugo growls before trying to calm himself down. "I mean, it doesn't matter, Deku. You can stay here. But what if you meet someone and you'll be staying here, nerd." Bakugo cuts him off. Izuku knows that nothing will change his mind now. "Okay." He agrees, still thinking it's too much for him. "It's not too late, Bakugo. If he comes back." And oh, the king snaps at Ashido, making her step back. However, she doesn't look like she's scared of him, just a little bit irritated. "I told you I can handle it." When Bakugo is gone, perhaps he can ask Kaminari or Kirishima about how to send a message to another god. He doesn't want Todoroki to worry about him. "Would you like something to eat, Deku?" For some reason, Bakugo looks a little bit desperate, almost like he wants his answer to be yes. Over the king's shoulder, he notices Ashido shaking her head. It confuses Izuku. "I'm not actually hungry at the moment. Besides, if he's dead he shouldn't feel hunger, right? Or maybe the dead eat just for the mere pleasure of it in the underworld. For the first time, Izuku feels like something is not right. The place is quite nice, Izuku thinks as he looks around, although he still believes it's too much for him. However, he can still board his ship if Bakugo ends up meeting someone he'll like to make his queen. He sleeps for a while. He doesn't think too much about the fact that he still feels sleepy and tired, but he supposes he really doesn't know much about the souls that end up in the underworld. He has no idea how long it has been, but at some point someone knocks at the door, not the entrance, but the small one he already knows it leads to Bakugo's room. "Come in, Kaken." The king walks inside. For some reason he looks nervous, rubbing the back of his neck like he's feeling shy. There are a couple of things for you in the wardrobe over there. If you don't like any of them, you could tell shitty hair or dunce face. Don't call them that. Izuku scolds him lightly, forgetting for a moment that he's a king and they're both in his kingdom. Fine. Kirishima and Kaminari. Izuku nods, satisfied, and Bakugo pretends he's irritated, but the demigod can see the king is smiling, even though he's not looking directly at him. Inside the wardrobe he finds a couple of clothes. They're beautiful, and even though most of them are tunics, some of them look like dresses. However, it seems all of them are new. It's like someone recently put them there. One of them in particular catches his eye. It's a long light green tunic with a few golden details on it. Are you sure? Izuku looks up at Bakugo, who for some reason blushes at the question. Although Izuku is too excited to think about it. The outfit is so pretty. Of course, nerd. Everything in there is for you, Bakugo says, surprising the young demigod for a moment. Really? Thank you, Kaken. He takes the one he likes the most and pulls him closer to himself. Now it's his time to blush. But would you mind? I'd like to. Sure, Deku. The king rushes out of the room in the blink of an eye. Izuku wonders why he's determined to look at the ground all the way out if the young man hasn't even started to change yet. As soon as he puts the other tunic on, he realizes that his body feels too real. Or maybe it's just because he's actually dead this time. He's not sure, but he realizes that's not really important, not at the moment. What he needs to do is to find a way to send a message to his mother. Shyly, the knocks at Bakugo's door. Kaken, are you still? The door opens even before he finishes the sentence. It's almost like the god was just waiting for him to finish. Did you like? Bakugo chokes, red eyes roaming all over Izuku, mostly over his exposed shoulders covered in freckles. His face is so red Izuku worries about him for a moment. Are you sick? He asks, taking a few steps forward before touching his cheek and forehead lightly. Sick? What are you talking about? Sorry, nerd, I'm fine. Since he apologized to Izuku, Bakugo has been trying to be more gentle towards him. Pretty. Thanks, Kaken. Izuku beams, prompting Bakugo to get even more flustered. Would you like to go for a walk around the palace? Of course. Izuku smiles back, taking the arm Bakugo's offering to him, suddenly feeling like a maiden for a moment. As soon as he finds Ashido, he'll ask her about ways to communicate with someone in the mortal realm. Ochako has a friend she visits regularly since the day he saved her from drowning. His name is Izuku. According to him, he's a minor deity with little powers that he only uses to make flowers and plants grow. She has always thought he underestimated himself, and she still believes he's destined to do something amazing. However, Ochako doesn't say that out loud anymore because Izuku doesn't believe her. That particular day she brings him food in a basket so they can spend the day together. But she doesn't find him in the flower field he's usually in. Instead, she finds Inko, the demigod's mother. Ochako nearly drops the basket as soon as she realizes the woman has been crying. Are you all right? Ochako dear. Inko says, trying not to sob. I'm glad you're here. Have you seen my Izuku? He hasn't come home since yesterday. Ochako shakes her head, worrying and hating to be the one to crush Inko's hopes again. A couple of tears escape from the woman's eyes. I'm sure she stops before finishing the sentence. There's no point in trying to cheer her up. They both know Izuku would never leave like that, without a word. He'd never do that to his mother or his friends. Which means that something happened to him. They go back to the woman's house and Ochako makes some food for the both of them, although the woman doesn't look like she's in the mood to do anything at the moment. Ochako doesn't blame her. Later that day, someone knocks at the door. Since Inko is too tired to move, Ochako opens the door for her. "You must be Todoroki," the girl blurts out. She has never seen him before that day, but Izuku has told her a couple of things about the other boy. Besides, even though he looks like any other mortal, there's something about him. Ochako can tell he's a god. "Is Izuku here?" "Shoto." That's when Inko rises from her seat and rushes towards the boy. It's obvious they have seen each other before. Ochako is almost sure Todoroki has stayed with them a couple of times. "What happened?" Trying not to cry, Inko explains everything to the young god. Ochako notices that the temperature of the house decreases considerably. "I'll find him," Todoroki promises, determined. "I'll bring him back." Both Ochako and Todoroki leave the woman at home. The girl makes her a hot, sweet beverage and convinces her to stay in bed for a while. "I'll find Ida first." Todoroki doesn't realize he's saying that out loud until Ochako asks him about it. "Who's that?" "Another god. The Herald." The girl nods, narrowing her eyes as she notices it's getting colder outside. Clouds are forming over their heads, but instead of rain, there's snow falling over them. "It's impossible. It's not winter yet. This can't be happening. The plants, their crops, everything will die." "What's?" She stops as soon as she notices Todoroki's right fingertips covered in ice. "I'm sorry. This is my fault. I can't quite control it, not when I'm extremely sad or worried." Ochako doesn't have time to think about the consequences. They can't stop it, at least she can't. Besides, she can't afford to worry about everything at once. "We need to find Izuku," she mumbles, silently praying nothing happens, that it doesn't get worse. She doesn't want to think what an endless winter would look like or how much damage it'd cause. Izuku knows this kind of treatment is because he's with Bakugo, but it's still a little bit weird to have everyone bowing in front of them. When they get outside again, Izuku finally notices that there's so much more to the underworld than he initially thought. The palace is nice, but he has always liked to be outdoors. They get to see a couple of souls roaming around before they get at the end of the line to board their respective ships. Bakugo rolls his eyes, although he still smiles when Izuku starts making flower crowns for them. He makes a particularly beautiful one for a little girl and gets a happy smile from her in return. Bakugo is almost glued to him the whole time. A warm hand on his lower back, sometimes on his waist if the souls take too long thanking Izuku for the flower crowns. Most of them seem to be afraid of the king, but relax as soon as their eyes meet Izuku's kind ones. He's fond of the kids. He sees a couple as he walks with his hand on Bakugo's strong arm. Some of them run towards him, grabbing his dress like it makes them feel safe. Izuku stays with the ones who seem to need company as they wait for their ships. Sometimes he holds their hand or carries them in his arms while he tells them a funny story about the mortal realm. Ashido finds them with a group of kids. Bakugo is trying to entertain them by using his powers to produce small explosions from his palms while Izuku hums a song for them. She looks conflicted, happy and yet worried at the same time. "Time for us to go, children," she says, pointing at the next line near the docks. Most of them pout, but comply nonetheless, only after saying goodbye to Izuku and Bakugo of course. Some of them even ask for a kiss on the cheek from the green-haired demigod. "You're really good with kids, Midoriya. I like them," he mumbles sincerely, part of him lamenting he's never going to have his own children now. Kaken likes to play with them too. The strong hand goes back to grab his waist almost immediately. Blinking, he realizes he's being pulled against the god's broad chest. "Probably because you asked him to," Ashido chuckles, ignoring the glare Bakugo throws her way. "He's so whipped." "Shut up, Pinky." Izuku realizes that even though Bakugo often sounds irritated or pissed, he actually appreciates his friends. Again, the smile vanishes from Ashido's expression, just to be replaced with a frown. That's when Izuku remembers he had something to tell her. "I was wondering if you could help send..." She interrupts him quickly, looking over his shoulder. She makes a quick gesture with her hand as if she wants to postpone that particular conversation. Then Ashido looks at Bakugo again. "This is clearly not a good idea," she says. "You should reconsider, perhaps if you let him go." "Come on, Deku." Bakugo cuts her off, taking Izuku's hand in his and holding it like he doesn't want to let go of him. "I wanted to show you something." But Ishido? I'll speak to her later. Izuku's concern gets forgotten as soon as he walks in the beautiful forest behind the castle. The place is dark, but there's some sort of blue light that makes everything look ethereal somehow. He's fascinated. His hands itch to make the trees grow and touch the leaves to feel the life beating inside them. I like it. Izuku beams, but Bakugo shakes his head, chuckling as he cradles the demigod's face in his hands. This is not what I wanted to show you, but I'm glad you like this place. What do you? Dynamite. Come here. Izuku has no idea whom Bakugo is talking to until he sees the figure of a huge dog with 3 heads and 6 glowing eyes rushing towards them. Now, I know he might look scary, but you're such a good boy, Izuku says immediately, taking a few steps closer towards the beast. So handsome. The dog starts wagging his tail immediately, allowing Izuku to stroke all of his heads, although he gets a little bit impatient when the demigod starts petting one at a time. That traitor, Bakugo mumbles, looking at the dog, although he seems more amused than annoyed at the scene in front of him. I've been here a couple of times. Izuku narrows his eyes at the king of the underworld, almost accusingly. Why didn't you introduce him to me before? You were in the limit of life and death all those times and didn't stay long, Bakugo retorts, getting closer to Izuku. The demigod still pouts, but doesn't stay mad for too long because the dog is constantly demanding attention. Can we take him to the castle, Kaken? Deku, please. Just once. Fine. Thank you. Izuku's so happy he gives Bakugo a kiss on the cheek. He's still so excited about the dog. He doesn't notice the way the god's face turns bright red or how gentle he uses his hand to touch the spot Izuku kissed. It turns out the herald is a tall god with dark hair and sandals with wings on them. Ochako would be more surprised if she hadn't heard about that deity before. They're back in Izuku's field when the other god calls him, and it has gotten considerably worse outside. The place is slowly being covered by snow and Ochako is trembling with cold. Here, Todoroki turns around, making a flame appear out of nowhere with his left hand. The fire floats towards her and stays very close to her body the whole time. It works, the cold disappears in the blink of an eye. Thank you. You're his friend, it's my duty to protect you. Todoroki nods in return before turning around to face Ida, the herald. Of course, Ochako tries not to roll her eyes because she's more amused than annoyed by the situation. It's funny how the god is constantly reminding her how much he cares about Izuku. But he's right, she's Izuku's friend and she cares about him as well. I need you to gather information about someone for me. I need to know where he is, Todoroki tells Ida, eyes shadowing with concern as he speaks. Or at least tell me if you heard something about him. His name is Midoriya Izuku and he's a demigod. He takes care of this field in particular. I know he's very kind and gentle with mortals. They love him dearly, Ida says, moving his hands up and down as he talks. But I haven't seen him in a while. He's never called me before. It doesn't surprise me. He doesn't do many of the things he should because he thinks he's a minor deity. Todoroki frowns at his own words before adding, I have told him many times that. Never mind, I just need you to find him if you can. I'll try, Ida nods, looking back at Ochako with curiosity. Wait, it's not winter yet. What's going on? It's me, I'm afraid. Todoroki looks embarrassed. I can't control it. My emotions trigger my right side usually, especially sadness. Is this because of Midoriya? Yes. You mean this is going to turn into a permanent winter if we don't find him? Ida asks, turning a little bit pale. I don't know. Something in Todoroki's expression breaks, but it's very subtle. I don't want to think about the possibility of not finding Izuku. Right? Sorry, Ida nods, throwing one last concerned look at Ochako. I think I should tell All Might about this. Todoroki nods before Ida goes. All Might as in the king of the gods? Ochako finally says, remembering that her mother mentioned she had been in his temple once. There's a huge statue of him there. The very same. She knows that means trouble, although she's still more worried about finding Izuku than anything else. Kaminari and Kirishima start playing with the huge, 3-headed dog as soon as they're back in the castle. They're very much amused by the situation. I thought you said he was better in his forest, Kaminari comments, for some reason looking at Izuku before turning his head back to Bakugo. Shut up. The god almost growls before pulling Izuku on his lap. I asked him to keep dynamite here, Izuku says then, prompting Kirishima to grin from ear to ear. Of course you did, Midoriya. He nods, ignoring Bakugo's irritated expression. We know he can't say no to you. After a while of listening to them arguing with Bakugo, Izuku excuses himself before going back to his room. The dog trots happily behind him. Deku, it's okay, Kaken. He can sleep in my room, he says before giving Bakugo the opportunity to refuse. When he walks out of the throne room, he believes he can hear Kirishima talking again. It seems that dog is better than you at this, Bakugo. If you don't shut up this instant. Izuku gets a little bit startled when he finds Ashido waiting for him in his chamber. The dog starts wagging his tail at her, but she seems to be in a hurry, so she doesn't pay too much attention to the creature. You wanted to tell me something earlier, she reminds him, and Izuku takes a parchment from one of his drawers, rolls it up and hands it to her. Can you send this to my mother? I just want her to know what happened to me. I want her to know I'm all right and that I'll be waiting for her when the time comes, he mumbles, getting a little bit teary-eyed. He shouldn't be sad, this is not a permanent goodbye. Why haven't you called the herald? Ashido asks, looking concerned. I don't think he'll listen to a minor deity, Izuku mumbles, cheeks turning slightly pink. You're not. Of course he'll listen to you. I don't think so. Ashido sighs, grabs a basket she had placed on one of the chairs and hands it to Izuku. It's full of delicious food. This food is from the mortal realm, you can eat this, she assures him. I'll bring you more soon, but don't eat anything else, okay? Why not? Izuku blinks back at her in confusion. What's the matter with the food in here? I don't think it'll be good for you, Ashido mumbles nervously. It's almost like she knows something else and is hiding it from him. Listen, I know my king is an idiot, but he's not bad, you know? I know. Izuku says immediately, almost defensively. Kaken has been very kind to me all this time. Looking away, Ashido bites her bottom lip. Her expression is full of intense worry and sorrow. What I'm trying to say is that he usually does what he wants because he's afraid of losing the things he loves the most. He doesn't stop to think of the consequences of his actions, but he really cares about you a lot. Well, he's my friend. Just. Ashido cuts him off, taking both of Izuku's hands in hers. Think of how much he cares about you and try to forgive him. Perhaps not right away, but please keep in mind that he truly loves you. There's nothing to forgive. He hasn't done anything wrong. Izuku stammers, a little bit worried now. Just promise you won't forget what I just told you. Promise. Tenya can see the concern in All Might's features as soon as he tells him about the situation regarding the demigod, Midoriya Izuku. We can't have an endless winter. Everything will die if this stays the same. Yes, that's exactly what Tenya was thinking about when Todoroki told him about his powers. It makes sense for him to have so much control on the mortal realm, since he's the son of a very strong god. But he knows All Might can't and won't let this to escalate even more. Midoriya is not dead, he suddenly says, surprising Tenya. I've seen the boy before because his mother prays for him a lot in my temple. She's a nice woman and has asked me to keep an eye on him. And so I have. He's really kind to everyone and more powerful than he thinks. Do you know where he is, sir? All Might sighs, looking sad. That's more than enough to know the answer, but the king of the gods still says, unfortunately no. I wasn't looking at him when he disappeared. However, I know he is alive because I can feel his life force now. It's quite strong. So perhaps he just ran away? Young Midoriya would never leave his mother. At least not like that. What do we do now? Call all the gods and tell them to meet me here. Do you think one of them is involved in this, sir? Most likely. Hurry up before winter gets worse. Izuku feels bad for leaving the cute dog to sleep on the floor, but he's too big to sleep on the bed next to him. However, he stays for a while with him, until Dynamite relaxes before Izuku jumps on the bed and goes back to sleep. In the morning, a soft knock at the door wakes him up. Dynamite is wagging his tail excitedly, although to Izuku's momentarily confusion, the big dog is staring at the side door instead of the entrance. That's when Izuku realizes it must be Bakugo. Just a second, he says before quickly putting on a new dress. That one doesn't cover his back at all, But it's okay because the place is warm that day. You can come in now, Kakin. Bakugo gets attacked by a very happy Dynamite who ends up licking his cheeks even though the god tells him not to. The scene makes Izuku chuckle and realize that even though he misses the mortal realm, he really enjoys being in the underworld. It has started to feel like home, although he's aware he'll have to get on a ship eventually. You two are really cute. He beams, knowing Bakugo doesn't like to hear those types of compliments. Cute? I'm anything but. Bakugo chokes as soon as he notices what Izuku's wearing. He seems to have forgotten he was irritated a few seconds ago. It looks good on you. Thanks, Kakin. Izuku says before turning around to start petting each of the dog's head. He gets a little bit startled when he feels a warm hand on his lower back for a moment. Bakugo has gotten used to put his hands on his waist very often, although this time it feels a little bit different because there's no fabric in between his skin and the god's palm. You also have freckles on your back, Bakugo comments. To Izuku's surprise, he's blushing to the tip of his ears. Yes, Izuku giggles. I told you my body is covered in them. Bakugo seems to get flustered at that, but he doesn't move his hand away. It's okay actually, Izuku doesn't mind. Are we going to cheer up some souls today? He asks, excited. He's already thinking about all the flower crowns he's going to make. I can't wait to see the children. Bakugo looks at him fondly. He cups Izuku's face with one hand, making him feel small. The king of the underworld is very tall. That sounds like an excellent idea, but we must have breakfast first. You haven't eaten? I have. Izuku cuts him off, pointing at the basket. There's still a couple of food inside, but not much. Everything was absolutely delicious. For some reason, Bakugo looks relieved. Izuku thinks that maybe he was worried about him. Although, he's not supposed to feel hungry, right? He remembers Kirishima explained to him that the people in the underworld still eat though, just for the pleasure of it, they still can taste the food after all. However, they only eat food from that place. Now that he thinks about it, Ashido brought that basket from the mortal realm for him. For a second he thinks about asking Bakugo, but something tells him he shouldn't. I bet the food here is better than anything you have ever tasted. Isn't that so, nerd? Weiss. Izuku says, feeling like a terrible person for lying. Well, I think we can see a couple of souls before leaving Dynamite back in. There's a knock at the entrance door. Bakugo narrows his eyes immediately and opens it with irritation. I hope it's important because I was. It is. Kirishima cuts him off, looking pale. Izuku immediately worries and gets closer to him. Are you all right? Of course, Midoriya. He says, although he doesn't look okay at all. He's clearly nervous, almost afraid. Everything's fine. There's someone who wants to talk with Bakugo in the throne room. All right, Bakugo nods, looking suddenly tense. However, when he turns around he tries to smile at Izuku. Why don't you go ahead and wait for me at the docks with Dynamite? I'll be with you soon. Izuku nods, knowing it's probably none of his business, but still a little bit worried. There's something going on. Mina tries not to look nervous in front of the herald. He hasn't said a word about what he's doing there, but she knows. It's about Midoriya. It has to be. When Kirishima and Bakugo walk in the throne room, Ida moves his head down as a form of respect. To Bakugo's credit, he doesn't look nervous. It's almost like he's bored, although Mina knows him and she can tell when he's not quite relaxed. He must know what this is about. I have a lot of things to do here, so spit it out. The king of the underworld grumbles like he usually does. Ida rolls his eyes. He's used to Bakugo's personality at this point, even though he doesn't go down to the underworld quite often. All Might requests your presence. He has something important to tell you. To me. To all the gods, Ida says. What does he want to tell us? Bakugo huffs with irritation, or that's the impression he wants to give, but he must be as distressed as Mina is at the moment. I'm not allowed to say. You must attend the meeting. Right now? At noon. Tell the old man I'll be there. Ida nods, although he grimaces when Bakugo refers to All Might as the old man. However, he doesn't say anything about that. It's not the first time Bakugo calls him that. When Ida goes, Mina feels like she can breathe again. Kirishima still looks pale though. She's glad they told Kaminari to stay with Midoriya because no matter how much she loves him, Kaminari is not known for keeping secrets, especially when he's nervous. Bakugo, this is your opportunity to let Midoriya go. No, the king almost growls at Kirishima. Come on. You can still fix this. Mina says, almost desperate and a little bit upset because of how stubborn and stupid that god is. I'm pretty sure he doesn't know it's you, but he knows it's one of the gods already. You don't know if this about my Izuku? Bakugo growls. However, he starts pacing around the room like he's in distress. She's right, Boro. Kirishima cuts in, with a worried expression on his face. You'll get in trouble for this. Listen, even if Midoriya goes back, you can still visit him in the mortal realm and court him there. No. That half-and-half bastard is gonna try to steal him from me. The god retorts as his palms emit little explosions. He's getting angrier. Mina knows he's suffered without Midoriya, when he thought the best thing for the demigod was to stay away from the underworld, but no matter how much Bakugo needs him, he can't get himself in this kind of trouble. Midoriya will find out eventually. And when he does, he'll get mad at you. She hates to point that out, but Bakugo needs an emotional slap to do what's right. He needs to snap out of his madness. The king's expression twists in pain. Mina doesn't like it, but he's her friend and she has to help him. He won't find out, he blurts out, stubbornly. Bakugo is so afraid of losing Midoriya he can't see the right path at the moment. Besides, it's too late now because he ate something from my realm, which means he can't go back now. Those are the rules. Did you give him food? That's not manly, Bakubro. You should have told him. There was a basket in his room. I didn't actually give him anything. However, Bakugo still looks guilty because he probably wanted Midoriya to eat. He wanted him to stay. Mina knows that's her basket though, which means Midoriya is still free to go, but she can't tell that to the king of the dead at the moment. They'll find out? They won't. Mina sighs. She's not Night Eye, which means she can't actually see the future, but she's sure this isn't going to end well. Bakugo and Midoriya will end up hurt. She knows her friend is not bad, but he had never been in love before and this feeling hit him way too hard for him to think of the consequences. Bakugo is so terrified of losing Midoriya that he's doing everything the wrong way. But she doesn't know what to do. She wishes there was a way to fix this. Do you like this place? There's a little bit of concern in Kaminari's question, but Izuku doesn't notice it because he's too busy making a flower crown for a little girl who had been crying. Izuku sits her over dynamite as he cheers up another group of kids on his way to the docks. It's one of his favorite things to do, help the souls in the underworld. Of course I do, he says, still looking ahead before scratching one of Dynamite's heads and taking the girl's hand before leaving her in the line to get to her boat. She's better now and even thanks Izuku for making her smile. Midoriya, I think? We don't need you here anymore, Dunce face. Kaken. Izuku says that both in surprise and to scold the god. He certainly didn't see him coming and got a little bit startled when he felt his hand on his lower back. Fine. The blonde rolls his eyes, making the kids around chuckle. Fuck off, Kaminari. Kaken. This time Izuku turns around to cover Bakugo's mouth with his hand, even though it's too late. There are children here. Also, Kaminari can stay as long as he wants. It's okay, Midoriya. I need to tell something to Kiri anyway, he says, smiling even though he still looks worried. I'll see you later. More kids gather around Izuku. The girl has grabbed the fabric of his dress and is looking up at him in awe. Are you the princess here? No, actually. He's the queen, my queen, Bakugo tells her, prompting Izuku to blush to the tip of his ears. The little girl and the other children giggle and Izuku realizes Bakugo is only saying that to make them happy. It doesn't mean anything. You're a very pretty queen. Thank you, little one, Izuku mumbles, feeling a little bit shy under all the attention. He can also feel Bakugo's eyes on him. Izuku decides to let all the children sit on Dynamite while he talks to other souls around. He listens to their stories and tries to comfort them as much as he can. When it's time for the children and the first group of people to go, Izuku turns around to ask about Bakugo's meeting when he realizes that the king has been watching him this whole time. There's a soft expression on his face, a fond glimmer in his eyes and such an intense expression that leaves Izuku flustered and speechless for a while. The girl was right, you really are pretty, Bakugo says, taking both of his hands. His voice is incredibly soft. Thanks. Izuku gets cut off by a kiss on his cheek. Then, Bakugo presses their foreheads together. There's something sad in the way he moves and stares at Izuku that worries him. I have to go. But I'll be back soon, alright? Izuku nods, still too overwhelmed to speak. I just want you to know that, no matter what happens, I truly care about you. I know, Kaken. I care about you too, Izuku says, almost immediately. His heart is full and his cheeks have turned pink, but he's concerned as well. Strong arms pulls him into a warm embrace that makes Izuku feel whole. He melts into the hug and laughs when Dynamite licks them both and Bakugo yells at the dog to stop. This has started to feel like home too. To say Tenya is worried is definitely an understatement, now that most of the gods are gathered around All Might, looking confused and irritated. He wonders how he's going to handle it. Endeavor and Shoto are there as well, and the sun god looks already furious, even though All Might hasn't talked about the problem they have in their hands yet. The king of the underworld has arrived too, and the grimace on his face is that of someone who's already displeased with the current situation, although to be fair, he always looks like that. The god of the shadows and night, Tokoyami, remains in a corner, silently waiting for everything to end. Of course, Tenya has no idea who's the god responsible for this mess, but he has the feeling that he's not the one. This is about Midoriya Izuku. All Might begins, however. Before he can explain who that is, Endeavor growls. We don't have time to talk about insignificant mortals. He's not insignificant. His own son protests then, making him huff in response. I told you not to get involved with mortals. I don't care what you think. Before the discussion can escalate, the god of wisdom and strategy takes a step forward. He always looks like a thin, very tired man with dark hair. He was one of the first gods. He taught Tenya and a couple of others how to perform their duties. The mortals who like to teach always pray to him. Midoriya Izuku is a demigod, Aizawa mumbles, surprising All Might himself. Do you know him? I have seen him a couple of times, he says. He's a problem child, but has a good heart. What happened to him? Yaoyorozu, the moon goddess, takes a step forward, looking genuinely worried. I've seen him too, running on the hills at night. He makes sure the fields stay full of flowers and the mortals' crops don't die so they have plenty of food during winter. He's gone, Shoto says almost fiercely. And I want him back. Bakugo looks like he's furious with the young god, but he's always angry at everything, so Tenya doesn't pay too much attention to that. His mother wants him back, All Might kindly says then. He's not dead, is he? Jiro asks. She's not a goddess, but she got turned into an immortal being because she's Yaoyorozu's lover and the moon goddess takes her everywhere she goes. Just then, everyone in the room turns to look at the king of the dead. Bakugo tenses for a moment before scowling at them. His name is not written in the Book of the Dead, he finally says, prompting Aizawa to narrow his eyes at him for a moment. Shoto sighs, relieved. And yet he's nowhere to be found, All Might continues. I don't see why that's our problem. Bakugo huffs, to which Endeavor agrees. The fields have started to get covered in snow, All Might explains. And it's not winter yet? That's my fault. Shoto moves away from his father before he can grab his arm. My power is acting up and I can't quite control it, especially when I'm overwhelmed by my own emotions. I'm confused. He's heartbroken because Midoriya is gone. Midnight, the love goddess, cuts Jiro off, looking at Shoto like she understands. That's why he can't control his power. For a moment, the youngest Todoroki looks like he's very flustered. His cheeks turn slightly pink, but he tries to hold it back. You're a very powerful god and I know you're a good kid, All Might says, making Shoto look proud for a moment. But if we don't find young Midoriya soon, you have to find a way to stop this or I'll have to take away your powers. You won't touch my son. For a moment it looks like Endeavor is going to punch All Might in the face, but Aizawa and the other gods, including Shoto himself, step closer to him in order to stop him if necessary. If we don't find Izuku and I can't figure it out how to stop this, I'll let you take my powers away. Shoto. The young Todoroki ignores him completely and turns to look at All Might instead. Is that why you brought us here, to help him find Midoriya? Tokoyami asks, intrigued. No, All Might shakes his head. looking almost sad and disappointed. He thinks one of us is responsible. Aizawa figures it out, surprising Tenya. I'm sure one of you is hiding Midoriya, All Might mumbles, looking from one god to another. Not all the gods are present, but Tenya has the feeling that the one who did it is right there. And I want to give you the opportunity to set things right. You have one day to bring him back, but if you don't, I'll go look for him myself. Izuku really wants to wait for Bakugo, but he's tired after spending all day trying to give some comfort to the souls waiting for their ships, so he jumps on the mattress and watches as dynamite lies on the floor next to the bed, almost like he's protecting it. However, he doesn't get to close his eyes, because someone rushes into the room. Izuku gets startled until he recognizes Bakugo. The king of the underworld doesn't say a word. He just sits on the bed and takes Izuku into his arms, pulling him close. What is it, Kaken? Are you alright? Did something happen? Izuku asks with concern, running his fingers through the god's hair to calm him down. Bad day. He grumbles before looking up and taking Izuku's face in his hands. Can I sleep next to you? He knows he's blushing, he can feel his face like it's burning, but Izuku keeps staring back into those piercing red eyes. Sure. He stammers, reminding himself that they're friends. It's okay to seek comfort from a friend. Bakugo smiles, almost relieved before he pushes Izuku back on the mattress and lies down behind him, wrapping his arms around his waist like he doesn't want to let go. Feeling comfortable and warm, Izuku's eyes start closing on their own. He's falling asleep, but he can feel Bakugo nuzzling against the back of his neck. I love you, Izuku. Don't ever forget that. That has to be part of a dream. Bakugo sounds too soft, too vulnerable for his words to be real. Izuku wonders what happened to him. He needs to ask him in the morning. When Izuku wakes up, Bakugo is gone and he's not going to lie. That makes him feel a little bit cold and lonely for some reason. The basket in his room is gone. There was still a little bit of food left he was hoping to eat in the morning. He's really hungry, and when he looks down to see the huge dog with 3 heads wagging his tail, he decides that he can take dynamite to his forest and find something edible for himself. Izuku knows Ashido doesn't want him to eat something from there, but Bakugo is always telling him the food is better in the underworld, so it can't be actually bad for him. Besides, he's just going to eat a little bit, that's it. Mina has never been more stressed in her life. The king hasn't actually told them what happened in the meeting with the other gods, but it must have been really bad because he didn't come back pissed like they all expected, but sad. And now Aizawa just walked in the palace, looking like he's going to scold them all like he used to when he was in charge of teaching them how to perform their duties. Even though he's strict, he's a very caring god, and Mina has a very special room in her heart for him. Sensei? Not your sensei anymore, Ashido. Aizawa corrects her immediately, but smiles a little. I have come to see Bakugo. She nods and guides him all over to the throne room before she rushes to find that ridiculous boss of hers. When she finds him right outside and tells him about Aizawa, his eyes darken with a deep sorrow. He must know what's about to happen. I know Midoriya Izuku is here, the god blurts out, not even giving Bakugo the opportunity to ask. I haven't told All Might, but I will if you don't do the right thing. The god of the dead grimaces, but he doesn't look irritated or pissed like he usually does. He's completely devastated, and despite all the mistakes he made, Mina feels sorry for him. I was going to ask the reason behind all this mess, but by the look on your face I think it's love, Aizawa continues, prompting Bakugo to turn slightly pink. Midnight knows more about it, but I have seen it a couple of times to know how selfish and crazy can be. Shut up. Bakugo growls, trying not to shake. He's yelling, but he seems like he's in pain. Just tell me what you want. I'm here to give you the opportunity to tell him everything and then let me take him back to the mortal world, with his mother. He's going to hate me, the king mumbles. He sounds like he's being tortured. He looks down so Aizawa doesn't notice the tears in his eyes, but Mina is sure the other god knows. I've seen Midoriya a couple of times, and even though I haven't spoken to him directly, I don't think he'll hate you. He'll be disappointed and hurt because you lied to him, but he'll be even more if someone else tells him what you did. He's been consuming food in my realm, so he can't? I've been giving him mortal food. Mina cuts Bakugo off, expecting a furious reaction, but instead the god nods at her, looking completely heartbroken already. It's devastating to watch. I'll bring him in a couple of minutes. he says before getting out of the room. He really loves him, Mina tells Aizawa then. I know. He decides to keep the pomegranate in his dress as he hears footsteps in the woods. Dynamite is already roaming around happily and wagging his tail as soon as he sees Bakugo. Izuku beams at him, but his smile vanishes quickly, just as he notices Bakugo is not grinning back at him. He looks sad. Kaken? Is everything okay? The king of the underworld shakes his head, but he moves closer, pulling Izuku into a tight hug. I'm sorry, Izuku. Getting seriously worried, Izuku pulls away to look into Bakugo's red eyes. What? Why? It's just... Wait, the blonde's voice trembles, and even though he's fighting against them, a couple of tears escape from his eyes. Let me do this, before I say goodbye, before you hate me. What? But, Izuku feels himself blush as Bakugo presses his lips to his forehead and nuzzles against his cheek. Then the god takes a deep breath as he keeps staring into his eyes. I lied to you. Izuku refuses to believe it's something that bad. It can't be. Bakugo is overreacting. They've been friends for a long time. You're not that. This is a really bad joke. The worst one. But it's not real, it can't be. Because if he's still alive, why am I here then? I brought you here. Bakugo grimaces, looking like he hates every single word that comes out of his lips. Izuku takes a few steps back then, and this time he ignores the hurt expression on Bakugo's face. He's too shocked to notice anything that's not his own heart and his tormented thoughts. But if I'm alive, my mother is. She must be. Devastated because she has no idea where you are, Bakugo forces himself to say, even though it hurts them both. And it's my fault. Why? Izuku starts sobbing, he can't help it. Dynamite whines and nuzzles his back. Bakugo tries to give him comfort too, but Izuku doesn't let him come closer. Why would you do this to me? I thought we were friends. We are. Bakugo says immediately. I didn't do this to. Listen, I didn't mean to hurt you. Friends don't do things like this to each other, Izuku mumbles as tears fall from his eyes. He's more hurt than angry. He likes Bakugo, he thought. I know. The king takes a deep breath, looking almost broken. I know. I got scared and I did something really stupid because I wanted to keep you here. But you said you didn't want to see me? I did. He cuts him off, grimacing in pain. Because I'm an idiot, because I thought if I told you that you weren't going to risk your life again. But I missed you so much, and I heard that stupid half and half bastard was trying to steal you from me. And I panicked. Half and half? What are you talking about? Todoroki. Shoto is my friend. I know, but he wants something more. Bakugo sighs, shakes his head, and for the first time his red eyes are completely open, exposed, vulnerable, and there are so many emotions in them, Izuku can't read them all. It doesn't matter. What I did was terrible and I'm truly sorry, Izuku. He still doesn't understand. Bakugo doesn't seem to hate him, and yet he kept him there and made him believe he had to stay. I want to see my mom. Bakugo nods and offers his hand, but Izuku doesn't take it. Right? Just follow me, I'll take you to Aizawa. Aizawa? Aizawa as in the god of wisdom and strategy? The same. Everything is so confusing and painful, Izuku barely notices what he's doing. He just knows that in the blink of an eye they're outside the palace again. Midoriya, the god nods, startling Izuku a bit. It's a pleasure to meet you, Aizawa. Sir. They're in the throne room. Kirishima, Kaminari and Ashido glance at him once and then back to the ground. They knew all along and no one told him. Well, Ashido tried to little. Suddenly her words make sense, the things she told him days ago. Izuku, I need time to think, he mumbles, looking away from Bakugo. I believe it's better if we don't see each other for a while. I understand. Izuku turns to Aizawa, who takes his hand. Will you take me to my mom? Yes, but we need to pay a visit to All Might first. All Might? The king of the gods? Izuku is going to faint. Izuku tries to calm himself down. He doesn't want to make a terrible first impression in front of the king of the gods. Although, it does help that Aizawa keeps holding his hand even after they appear in the top of the mountain, the palace. You're a good kid, Aizawa tells him, in a clear attempt to cheer him up. That is definitely working. Even though you get in trouble quite a lot. The god narrows his eyes as he says it, but it's clear he's not actually mad at him. Izuku can't help but chuckle. Finally, the god lets go of his hand as they walk in the lobby. It's an elegant place with very few things. Feels a little bit cold, or maybe it's just that Izuku still feels sad about what happened. Midoriya. All Might approaches them like he's in a rush, like he's been worried this whole time. Izuku gets nervous, wondering if he'll get scolded. All Might knows his name, which means the problem escalated quickly. Where did you find him, Shota? Aizawa crosses his arms over his chest and shakes his head before looking back at Izuku. Will Bakugo get in trouble if he tells the truth? It doesn't matter, Izuku finds himself saying. I just want to go home. All Might is still staring at him, making him feel even more nervous than before. Is he disappointed? Maybe Izuku shouldn't care about what he thinks of him, but the truth is that All Might has always been some sort of hero to him. They won't get in trouble unless they hurt you. Did they? No, he didn't. Izuku assures him immediately, almost fiercely. All Might smiles softly at him and Izuku suddenly has the feeling that he can trust him. He knows he won't be harsh on Bakugo for what he did. It was Kaken? The king of the dead. But he was really kind to me the whole time. And perhaps that's why the truth hurt a lot. Izuku still can't understand why Bakugo did something like that. He mentioned something about Todoroki, but nothing made sense. For a moment, All Might is confused and it makes Izuku feel a little bit flustered for some reason. He looks down at the ground. Why would he do something like that? I thought he didn't like to get involved with the mortal world. Or anyone outside his realm for that matter. We were friends, Izuku tries to explain, and it pains him a little when he realizes he's talking about their friendship in the past tense. I think he just felt lonely. He needs someone to be there for him. All Might still looks confused. It's like something in Izuku's story doesn't make any sense. But that's the whole truth, there's nothing else to it. And yet Izuku feels like something's missing as well. Something he doesn't know. It's love, Aizawa cuts in, drawing All Might's attention to him. I see. But Izuku doesn't. Those two gods are looking at each other like they have everything figured out and Izuku is still confused. Of course there's love. Bakugo clearly loves him as a friend, otherwise he wouldn't have wanted to keep him in the castle, but Izuku doesn't see why that's relevant. It's that complicated, huh? And then there's young Todoroki. Is Shoto alright? Izuku looks at All Might with worry, wondering how he's doing. There's also Uraraka and his mother. He needs to see them. He's been looking for you, All Might says, patting Izuku's head gently. And your mother is worried about you, so I guess it's time for you to go back. Thank you. He smiles, hugging All Might before he can stop himself. Fortunately, the god chuckles before he hugs him back. Izuku turns around with a hopeful grin on his face, watching as Aizawa shakes his head. No, I'm not good at. Izuku pulls him into a tight embrace anyway, and even though Aizawa insists he doesn't do that kind of things, he doesn't push the boy away. Please don't tell anyone about Bakugo. Aizawa and All Might look at each other for a moment. There's a little bit of hesitation in their eyes that vanishes before All Might sighs and nods. We'll keep the secret. Thank you. Izuku grins, wondering what he's going to tell his mother and his friends. Izuku is definitely not prepared for the way his mother pulls him into her arms and starts sobbing against his chest. She keeps crying and saying his name a couple of times until she looks up at him and offers him something to eat with the sweetest smile. It makes Izuku cry too, which is a bad thing because his mother starts sobbing again. It takes them both a while, but they finally start eating something together. Inko hasn't asked him about what happened, but Izuku knows she will eventually. The taste of food makes him remember that he still has an entire pomegranate from the Underworld hidden in his dress, and he makes a mental note to leave it in his room. Were you trapped? Did someone hurt you? No one hurt me, he tells her and watches as the relief lights up her eyes a little bit. But I couldn't come back. Aizawa and All Might helped me though. They took care of everything. Inko has always been a very intuitive woman and she can tell Izuku doesn't want to talk about what happened anymore. So she doesn't insist, she knows he'll tell her eventually. He sees his friends the next day in the field. Aizawa paid them a visit to them both to inform them Izuku was fine, but told them to leave him to his mother for a while. Izuku is trying to get everything back to normal. The unexpected snow affected most of the flowers, but he knows he can make them grow back up in no time. Although his mind is not entirely focused on the task because he's still thinking about Bakugo, and even though he's missing him, he's still a little bit upset because he lied to him. Then Uraraka jumps into his arms and just like his mother, she starts sobbing. Izuku runs his fingers through her hair and kisses her cheek, prompting her to pull away slowly to finally grin at him. "I was so worried about you." "We both were." Over her shoulder, Izuku finally notices Todoroki. He's staring at him intensely, and even though he doesn't say anything at the moment, Izuku knows the god with mismatched eyes missed him too. "Hi, Shoto." Izuku smiles before hugging him. Although Todoroki's embrace is tight and it lasts longer than Uraraka's because it seems the other boy doesn't want to let go of him. "Izuku," the word comes out almost broken, and Izuku decides that he definitely deserves a kiss on the cheek too. However, Todoroki blushes to the tip of his ears afterwards. The three of them sit under Izuku's favorite tree. The field has begun to look like it used to, but it needs a lot of work still. "Tell me who did this to you." Uraraka elbows Todoroki when she notices the tension on his shoulders. A couple of flames appear on his left fist out of the sudden. "It doesn't matter," Izuku mumbles, prompting Uraraka to quirk up a brow at him. "It does? All Might is taking care of it," he assures them, trying to dismiss it with a gesture of his hand, but he knows his friends won't let it go that easily. "Besides, no one hurt me." "Where were you?" "Why do you want to know?" Izuku asks back, startling Todoroki for a moment. He blushes and looks away from him. "I just want to make sure it doesn't happen again." "It won't," Izuku assures him, and he's being completely sincere because he knows Bakugo wouldn't do that again. He looked like he was so ashamed of himself last time Izuku saw him. He thinks his answer is enough, and it is, at least for Uraraka, who simply nods at him. However, Todoroki narrows his eyes at him. He's not happy. "Why are you trying to protect them after what they did?" "I'm not." Izuku bites his bottom lip nervously, knowing his face is turning pink. He made a mistake, but he was sorry. He shouldn't have said that. He accidentally gave Todoroki a little bit of information. Sometimes being sorry is not enough. Izuku sighs, but doesn't worry even though Todoroki is still tense and upset. He understands, the problems he has had because of his father have made him that way. It's obvious that his friend was genuinely concerned about his safety, and Izuku is grateful to have someone like him in his life. He takes a few steps closer and cradles Todoroki's face in his hands, prompting the young god to soften immediately. The frown upon his face disappears completely. "I'm here now, Shoto," he whispers with a smile on his face. "Isn't that what is truly important?" "It is," Todoroki nods, staring at him fondly. "I missed you." "I know," Izuku says. He tries to give him another hug, but Todoroki leans to kiss his forehead and cheeks, making him giggle. Even though the god assures him he's fine now, Izuku can tell he won't let it go just like that. Uraraka seems to be thinking the same because when she looks from Todoroki to Izuku, her eyes are shadowed with concern. Izuku hopes he doesn't do anything reckless. Izuku knows it's not his responsibility, but he can't help but worry about the children who end up in the underworld. He really enjoyed making them laugh and smile. Some of them seem lost and scared, but having someone telling them that they're going to be fine helps, and he definitely enjoyed making flowers crowns for them. He doesn't realize he's making a flower crown at the moment, making it appear suddenly, until he looks down at his hands. Izuku sighs, but tries to smile before putting it on. It's not the same. What about Dynamite, Kirishima, Kaminari, and Ishido? They were very good to him as well. Although they never actually told him what was going on. He misses Bakugo already. Izuku shakes his head and tells himself this is for the best. His mother needs him, his field needs him, and the crops of the people who work hard on them need him too. He has things to do, and so does Bakugo and his friends. And maybe they're better this way. They're better apart. Although Izuku would like to talk to Bakugo again, to understand, he still doesn't know what was the reason why he did all that, and Izuku knows he needs to find out. He needs a better explanation. It's okay, he tells himself. It'll be fine. His friends visit him more often, especially Todoroki. Although he looks different now, Izuku is almost sure he's still thinking about what happened. He wishes he could let that go. The young god mumbles, looking down at his own hands. I'm worried about you. What if he tries to do that again? What if he takes you and I won't see you again? He won't. Todoroki grimaces at his words and Izuku just wishes with all his heart he stopped suffering because of him. How can you be so sure? He's my friend. At that even Uraraka quirks up a brow at him. He doesn't blame her, he doesn't blame any of them for their reactions. They don't know how kind and sweet Bakugo can be. Although the thing that surprises him is that the words come out of his mouth without even thinking about them. Izuku can't help but smile because there's no doubt in his mind now, Bakugo is still his friend. At least in his heart. How can you say that? Todoroki is obviously hurt, however Izuku is not entirely sure why. We are your friends. How can you say the same of someone who outright abducted you? The word is like a slap on Izuku's face. Yes, it's true, no matter the intentions. But Izuku knows. He saw it in his eyes, that Bakugo truly regrets what he did and he definitely deserves a second chance. He has the feeling that even if he explained it to Todoroki, he wouldn't understand. I'm tired. I'm going back home. Izuku. I'm sorry. It's okay, Shoto. He whispers. Goodbye, Ochako. Uraraka pays him a visit the next day and it seems like this time she's the one who wants to talk about it. Listen, I'm not saying you should not consider him your friend. I just really hope that you have in mind that what he did was wrong. I know. Uraraka nods and then after a while she sighs again. I'm not on Todoroki's side, but I understand why he says that. I mean, we were really worried about you, your mom was too and none of us had a clue of what happened to you. I don't know what his intentions were or what he said to you, but it's still wrong. Izuku nods. I know he did something wrong, but he apologized and I know he won't do it again. Uraraka takes his hand and rests her head over Izuku's shoulder as they look at the flowers in the field. Everything's going back to what it was before. However, Izuku's heart still hurts and he sobs because he can't help it. Uraraka turns around with concern in her eyes and pulls him into a hug. Was it something I said? No. Do you want to talk about it? Yes, but promise me you won't tell anyone. I promise. Izuku tells her everything, right from the very first time he met Bakugo. Wow. I didn't know the god of the dead was an idiot. Izuku chuckles. Ochako. He's not bad, she continues, ignoring him. But he's certainly an idiot. Her words immediately make Izuku feel a lot better. Where do you have the pomegranate, by the way? In my room. It's just something to remember my time there. Besides, I know it'll stay the same no matter how many days pass because it's from the Underworld. What happens if you take a bite? It's forbidden to eat anything from the Underworld if you're still alive, Izuku explains. I think I'd be back there if I ate it. So you also keep it in case you want to see him again. Uraraka narrows her eyes at him, making him blush. Izuku hadn't honestly thought about that, but maybe she's right. She sighs, before putting her arms around him. You're right, you shouldn't tell any of this to Todoroki. He'd get jealous. Jealous? Izuku snorts, thinking she's joking. But I don't think he wants to visit the Underworld. Of course not. I mean because he's in love with you too. In love? No, it can't be. Then his face turns even more red to the point where his freckles disappear for a moment, because there's something she just said that doesn't make sense. Wait. What do you mean he's in love with me too? When Mina doesn't find the explosive boss in the throne room, she knows things have gone from bad to absolutely terrible. Carrying the Book of the Dead and reading over the last 3 names, she sighs. 3 little kids. He's overworking himself, isn't he? Kirishima and Kaminari are a little bit busy trying to convince the 3-headed dog to get out of the castle. But Dynamite keeps whining. He's been sleeping in the room Midoriya stayed in, the Queen's chambers, and looking devastated. The owner is going through the same. Although it's even worse for him. What do you think? Kirishima sighs. As if that could stop him from missing Midoriya. To be fair, I miss our queen too, Kaminari mumbles. Mina can't even roll her eyes at him because she feels the same. It's just not the same in the Underworld without him. He'd know what to do with the kids. I'm going to pay him a visit. Ashido. I know what I'm doing. Mina cuts Kirishima off and turns her head away in order to avoid looking at the worried expression on his face. I just want to know if he's okay, and maybe find out if there's still a little bit of hope for Bakugo. I have a bad feeling about this. You're making a fuss over nothing. It'll be fine. She has a bad feeling too, but she's determined to ignore it. Mina knows she'll be fine. It's just another little visit to the mortal world. She's done that before and she can do it again. However, she's still as careful as she can. The mortals sometimes are curious and she doesn't want her presence to be noticed, at least not yet. She just wants to see Midoriya from afar. The book feels heavy in her hands and she knows. The little kids are wandering lost down there, but Mina needs to know. She must find out if there's hope for her explosive boss. And then she sees him. Midoriya is taking care of his field, making things grow and work as they used to be, bringing life as he's supposed to do. The clothes he's wearing are different from what he was wearing in the underworld, but they're also really pretty. He's smiling and for a moment Mina hesitates. She wonders if this is the right thing to do. Perhaps Midoriya is happier and safer here. It's true that he helped a lot of people on the other side, but that doesn't mean he's destined to be there. And yet Bakugo is very much in love with him and misses him to the point it physically hurts him. She takes a step back, but it's too late. Midoriya has spotted her and now he's practically running towards her with a beautiful smile on his face. Suddenly he pulls her into his arms and lifts her from the ground for a couple of seconds. Mina melts into the hug and realizes that even though she's worried about Bakugo, she also missed Midoriya herself. They're friends. Tell me, Midoriya mumbles, cheeks turning slightly pink as he speaks. How is he? Mina has to hold back a smile, because just at that moment she realizes that there's hope for the god of the dead after all. Oh. He's grumpy, but when is he not? She says, and even though that makes Midoriya smile a little, the joy doesn't reach his pretty eyes. He misses you quite a lot and feels bad about what he did. Midoriya looks away right before wiping a couple of tears off his eyes. I miss him too, I miss everyone, he whispers. But maybe this is where I'm supposed to be. I'm not dead yet after all. It's so obvious that he wants to go back that Mina is tempted to encourage him. But at the same time, she knows that he likes the mortal world as well. He helps a lot of people here. What about you and the others? What about Dynamite? Mina is hesitant to tell him the truth, but she also knows she can't hide anything from him either, because she did that once and he doesn't deserve that again. She wants to do things the right way this time, so she tells him the truth. Poor Dynamite. Midoriya laments. Oh, please tell Kirishima and Kaminari to leave him in that room if they can. Mina nods, knowing she'll have to talk with them in secret because Bakugo will surely explode if he finds out. But I can't promise anything. What about the souls? Mina sighs, but shows him the 3 names in her book. Children? Yes. She can tell it hurts Midoriya and that he's tempted to go back, but he's struggling as well. It seems he's having an internal battle with himself because he shakes his head after a couple of seconds before making appear 3 beautiful flower crowns. Give them these and tell them they'll be fine, Midoriya whispers, wiping another couple of tears off his face. Mina nods even though she doesn't know if it's going to work. I remember you. The voice startles her, but fortunately she's already taken the crowns and hidden them before the god appeared. Todoroki Shoto, the powerful and talented son of one of the most important gods. He immediately stands in between Midoriya and her as if he's trying to shield him. Mina tries not to feel offended. You paid him a visit last time, Todoroki continues, glaring at her. Right before he disappeared, that young god is not only powerful but smart as well, which is very unfortunate for her. That doesn't make her responsible for what happened. Midoriya protests, although he pouts, before taking one of Todoroki's hand in his. But maybe she knows. Hey, Shoto, Midoriya cuts him off, but he's very sweet and gentle when he does. He even cradles the god's face in his hands and as Mina predicts, he melts right into the touch. I told you that wasn't going to happen again, remember? I'm not going anywhere. Maybe Bakugo doesn't have that much hope after all, although Mina refuses to believe that. Besides, she has a lot of things to do. Midoriya gives her a look and she understands immediately that it's better for her to go. It's more than obvious that Midoriya hasn't told his friend, perhaps none of them, what happened, at least not all of it. He pulls Todoroki into his arms and although the god returns his embrace softly, it looks like, for a moment, He'd do anything to keep hugging Midoriya forever. Todoroki glares at her over Midoriya's freckled shoulder, and Mina knows that he's making connections in his mind. He knows something and he is not going to let it go. Which means she's in trouble. Todoroki stays with him for a while. He seems to have relaxed a bit, especially after Izuku sits under a tree and allows his friend to lie down next to him and use his lap as a pillow. He doesn't bring Ishido up again, but Izuku is still worried about what happened. "Do you like this place, Izuku?" he asks suddenly, staring up at him as the green-haired demigod runs his fingers through his mismatched hair. "Of course I do." Izuku chuckles as he points around him. "This is my field and I'm very proud of it." "No, I mean..." Todoroki takes his hand, surprising Izuku a bit and making him turn red when he presses a kiss to his palm. "I mean the mortal world." For some reason the sentence makes him nervous. He feels like it's a trick or something like that. Part of him is tempted to tell him all about the underworld and the things he saw there that Izuku loved, but then he would have to tell him about what happened. And it seems like Todoroki is not ready to hear that, at least not the whole story. "Of course I like the mortal world," Izuku says, which is entirely true. "Is there no other place you'd rather be?" As he says this, Todoroki intertwines their fingers together. He's very gentle, but for a moment Izuku has the feeling that his friend is afraid to let go of him. "No," he mumbles, but this time he lies. "I'm glad," Todoroki smiles, before rising into a sitting position again. He wraps his arms around Izuku and pulls him closer to his chest before kissing the other's cheek. "I'm scared of losing you again." "You won't. I told you I'm not going anywhere." "I know." Instead of keeping him company for a couple of hours, Todoroki stays the whole day with him in the field and even walks him home when it's dark again. He kisses Izuku's forehead as a goodbye. "I'll come back tomorrow," he says before shaking his head. "Well, I have something to take care of first, but I hope it doesn't take me long." Even though his friend is smiling, Izuku suddenly has a bad feeling. It's not the same without Midoriya around, but the flower crowns do cheer the little kids up a bit. Mina even finds herself chuckling when later that day Kirishima and Kaminari get excited about the messages Midoriya sent them. And then Bakugo rushes inside the castle and steps right in front of her like a desperate man or desperate god, if she wants to be more accurate about it. Is Izuku back? Is he here? Mina blinks a few times, confused, but then, "I saw a couple of children with flower crowns. New ones. I'm sorry. I paid him a visit. He gave me the flowers for them." Instead of getting angry, like he would years ago, Bakugo nods, almost devastated. His shoulders fall and it's obvious that he misses Midoriya more than anything. "Is he alright?" "Yes." Mina can tell Bakugo is aching to ask more, to ask if Midoriya said something about him, if he misses him, but he shakes his head slightly and turns around to go back to work. It's heartbreaking, which is why she decides not to worry him even more, although she has the feeling that she should mention about what happened with Todoroki, because it seems like it could be a problem. She just hopes she's wrong. That morning Izuku goes back to his field. Taking care of the plants and flowers that grow there gives him purpose and helps him relax. That's exactly where a desperate woman finds him. He's tending to his most precious flowers when she approaches him, looking quite desperate. Please, young man," she mumbles, looking down the ground. "They say you're a god. Please help my crops grow." Izuku would like to tell her the truth. He's just a demigod with little powers, but he knows humans care little about those things. She just wants help. And fortunately, that's something he can do. It's easy. Izuku has always been connected to nature in some sort of way that he doesn't have to make too much to encourage the crops to grow. The family invites him to stay and have lunch with them, and even though Izuku has a couple of things to do, he's not sure he can say no to them. However, that's when he sees him through the window, the one the family has in their home kitchen that has the view of the field they live close by. Izuku rushes outside to greet him. "Aizawa-san." He chuckles happily. "It's been a while." The woman who asked him for help runs out the door, right after him. She looks with curiosity at Aizawa. "Are you another god?" Aizawa is not a social deity and Izuku knows it. He likes to avoid any sort of contact with mortals and other gods as much as he can. However, he's very good at protecting people in his own way. Although it's still weird to see him there. I'm just a man in trouble that'll have to steal this young god from you. He tells her. Izuku is surprised to watch him lie to a mortal, but he supposes it's because he doesn't like the attention. Oh, okay. The woman and the family say goodbye to them, assuring Izuku he's always welcome in their home. When they're out of sight, Aizawa takes his arm and makes them both appear in Izuku's field. What is it? He worries for a moment, looking at the god with a frown. Something must have gone wrong. Aizawa rolls his eyes and pokes Izuku's forehead gently. Stop that right now, he sighs, rolling his eyes. I just wanted to see if you haven't gotten yourself in trouble again. As the concerned expression appeared, it vanishes quickly from Izuku's face, being replaced by a huge smile. You were worried about me? Izuku beams, tearing up a bit. It's weird to have someone like him caring for him. His own father left him and his mother when he was just a baby. I just don't want you to cause any trouble, Aizawa says, looking away and crossing his arms over his chest. It's okay, Izuku is happy to have him there. He spreads his arms. No. You know I don't do hugs. It's too late, Izuku pulls him into his arms, purposely ignoring his protests, although, just like last time, Aizawa doesn't push him away. I'll make you a flower crown. No, Midoriya. He allows Izuku to put the crown on his head, and since the green-haired demigod tells him the flowers will never die, Aizawa promises to wear it every now and then. How are you feeling? He asks after a while, prompting Izuku to look back at him in surprise. How are you truly doing? Are you happy? Perhaps it's the sincere expression on Aizawa's face or the softness in his voice when he asks, but Izuku feels like he can't lie to him. I miss the underworld. I miss Kaken. I see, Aizawa mumbles, ruffling the young demigod's hair. But I'm fine. Izuku assures him. I know this is where I'm supposed to be. Aizawa sighs, but doesn't make another comment on that. You truly are a problem child, aren't you? He says, trying to look irritated, but Izuku notices he's holding back a smile. Mina is at the dock, checking the book while looking around to see if the souls are ready to board their respective ships. When it happens, Kaminari appears next to her, not exactly startling her because she's used to it, but surprising her, especially because he looks quite stressed at the moment. What is it? A god has arrived. She feels cold, even though it should be impossible, but she swears a shiver runs down her spine for a moment. It could be anyone and it shouldn't be that big of a deal, but she has the feeling this is about their dear Midoriya. Does Bakugo know? I'm scared to tell him. Kaminari admits, prompting her to roll her eyes. Well, you have to. I'll see who it is and bring them to the castle. I'll go to Kiri first. She's about to protest, but she feels the new presence right away. It's too warm to be Aizawa or Yaoyorozu or even Ida. She approaches the river of the dead. The liquid that runs down is not quite water, but it's also not air. It's a mixture of the two. Behind the tall figure that's in charge of moving the boat is the god that Mina didn't want to see in the underworld. Hi, Todoroki. I saw you yesterday. Mina blurts out, trying not to sound as nervous as she feels. You must have missed me. Ha. Of course he doesn't smile in return. There's only a neutral expression on his face that makes Mina feel more uneasy. I want to have a meeting with the king of the underworld. But, you have never paid any visits to my boss before, so? You know why I'm here? Mina tilts her head to the side, trying to look innocent. No, of course not, she says, lying through her teeth. She knows Todoroki is not 100% sure it was Bakugo who took Midoriya. He's just trying to make her say it first. For a second, the left side of his head lights on fire, but Todoroki takes a deep breath before running his fingers through his own hair to extinguish it. It doesn't matter, just take me to him. There's a rebellious part of her that wants to protest, but Mina knows she doesn't have a choice there. Okay. This is her fault. At least Bakugo is in the throne room by the time they walk inside. Todoroki looks at him in the eyes, before frowning. Since you're in my domain, I think you should tell me the reason why you came, Bakugo growls, forgetting every single lesson his father taught him about being polite to other gods or at least try to be. Well, Mina understands, a little bit. Todoroki is the reason why the god of the dead decided to take Midoriya to the underworld in the first place, because he's perfectly aware of the nature of Todoroki's feelings for Midoriya. Did you take Midoriya that time? Was it you the one who abducted him? Bakugo grimaces in pain at the word, but doesn't look away from the other god when he answers. Yes. It's not like his expression changes at all, but there's something in Todoroki's demeanor that suddenly looks terrifying for a moment. If you do something like that again, I'll come back for him myself. I'm not going to do that, half and half. Bakugo growls, absolutely pissed. But not because of you. My Izuku doesn't deserve it. When he comes back it'll be because he wants to. He won't be coming back. Are you sure about that? Bakugo smirks, prompting the other god to close his hands into fists. Because he likes this place. He likes the mortal realm better. That's a lie. Mina sighs, knowing those two idiots are not actually talking about realms anymore. If that's everything you wanted to say, then I'll be glad to walk you back outside. Mina finally cuts in. They're both acting like kids, but she's still on Blasty's side. That's all I wanted to say, Todoroki nods, before heading outside on his own. He doesn't belong here. You don't get to decide that. When the other god is out of sight, Mina watches as Bakugo collapses on the throne, looking devastated. But what if Izuku doesn't want to come back? It's a question he obviously doesn't want the answer to, so Mina doesn't respond, but now she knows what she must do. She's going to tell Midoriya what happened. Spending time with a friend really helps him feel much better. Uraraka has been visiting him lately, which Izuku truly appreciates. They're often in the demigod's field or inside his house because his mother and Uraraka get along quite well. That morning they're in the field and Uraraka is trying to make one flower crown with her own hands, she insisted, while she listens to Izuku talking about all kinds of plants and what they're used for. So I can make something to treat wounds with these flowers? Uraraka asks, fascinated. Yes, if you combine them in the portions I told you and leave them in a jar for a couple of days. The paste that comes from them could be used on injuries and it prevents them from getting infected. That's amazing. I try to make some myself. Izuku nods, always happy to help people. When he's about to add something about the red lilies, he spots Ishido in the distance. He gets happy and a little bit sad at the same time. Seeing her makes him think about Bakugo and how much he misses him. Hi. How are you doing? I need to talk to you, she says immediately, completely serious, eyeing Uraraka for a moment. It's okay, Izuku says. She's my friend, she can stay. Ishido nods, before Izuku makes the introductions. Although the expression on Ishido's face makes him worry a lot. Okay, she takes a deep breath. This is what happened. When she's done, Izuku is concerned, but a bit irritated too. He doesn't like when others try to choose for him. I'm going to talk to Shoto, Izuku assures her. And I'll make sure he doesn't do anything like that again. I'm sure Todoroki did it because he was worried about you, Uraraka cuts in. Blasty is worried about you and he misses you a lot, Ishido suddenly says, prompting Izuku to look back at her again. You should go talk to him too. But there's no way to go back to the underworld except by taking a bite of that pomegranate. Is the right thing to do? Isn't he supposed to stay here? Besides, he's not sure what could happen next. If he takes a bite, will he be able to return to the mortal realm? What should he do? Talk to Todoroki first, Uraraka says then, earning a slightly irritated expression from Ishido. Let him explain himself. You're right. Izuku agrees, feeling sad suddenly because he also wants to see Bakugo. I should listen to what Shoto has to say first. He spends the next day thinking about what happened, about how much he doesn't want his friends to fight each other or to argue with each other because of him. Bakugo is still his friend. The time he spent away from the god has made Izuku realize how much he enjoys his company. And even though it doesn't make things right, he knows Bakugo is truly sorry about it. And yet, Izuku feels like he needs to talk to him again, to understand why he did what he did that day. He needs to go back because he's almost sure Bakugo still feels so bad about what happened he won't agree to meet Izuku in the mortal realm. Kaken. Izuku is so immersed in his own thoughts. He gets quite startled when he hears someone approaching him, footsteps against the grass, fabric making contact with plants and flowers. Todoroki is in his field now. It seems he has no idea Izuku found out about what happened because he looks as calm as always. He takes a couple of steps closer, his hand ready to touch Izuku's cheek, like he always does, but gets surprised and a little bit hurt when Izuku moves out of the way. Aizu. You went to the underworld to threaten Kakin? He asks, crossing his arms over his chest. You mean Bakugo? Todoroki narrows his eyes, he's clearly upset now. I just told him to never do that to you again. That I'd come for you. I told you he wouldn't. You shouldn't have done that, Shoto. How can you trust him after what he did? Izuku narrows his eyes as well, taking more steps back. Even though Todoroki notices it, he doesn't make any attempts to close the distance between them. We have talked about this already, Izuku reminds him, getting irritated too. He's sorry and I trust him. Well, I don't. That's okay, but you should trust me. He sighs, trying to calm himself down. He's not usually like this, but he's so overwhelmed by his own emotions he can't help it. Besides, I didn't ask you to do this. There's a reason why I didn't tell you about Kakin in the first place. I'm sorry, the young god finally mumbles, looking down. I still don't like him. I know. Izuku takes a deep breath, surprising himself by how tired he sounds. Are you going to see him again? Someday? Todoroki wants to protest. He clearly doesn't like the idea, if the smoke coming from the left side of his head is any indication, but he manages to control himself and nod. Are you angry with me? He looks so sad, Izuku can't help but soften immediately. No, I'm not. But I didn't like that you went there without telling me and tried to decide for me. I understand that and I'm truly sorry. Finally, Izuku feels himself relax. Can I get a hug? Please, Izuku? Sure, the green-haired demigod nods. He tries not to gasp when Todoroki pulls him into a tight embrace. The young god breathes into his soft curls and nuzzles against his cheek. Izuku worries for a second because it looks like Todoroki doesn't want to let go. Oh, I need to go back. I promised a young couple I'd take care of their crops today, Izuku says, pushing Todoroki away, although he tries to be gentle. Can I see you tomorrow? I'd like to be alone for a while. I need time to think, Izuku mumbles, noticing the way Todoroki grimaces in pain. I understand. Once he's alone again, Izuku looks up at the sky, feeling like there's something wrong, although he convinces himself it's just him projecting his negative feelings into the near future. Or at least he hopes that's the case. You have been invited to a celebration in the Olympus. It's tomorrow. To be honest, the last thing Izuku expects is to be visited by the messenger of the gods that particular morning. He's nervous. He's not entirely sure they'd want him up there because he's not actually a god. All Might wants you to come, Ida insists. Then, looking around as if he'd like to make sure no mortal is around, he adds, you belong there as much as any other god does, Midoriya. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Feeling better, but also incredibly nervous at the same time, Izuku nods before beaming at Ida and giving him a hug. Thank you, he says sincerely. You're really kind. Okay, tell him I'll be happy to be there. Before the messenger could turn around, however, Izuku takes him by the arm to stop him. Did you know which gods will be there? The green-haired demigod mumbles, turning slightly pink. Ida puts one of his hands under his chin, like he's trying to picture the list of guests inside his head, then he stops when he actually sees Izuku's expression. Do you want to know if the god of the dead will be there? Izuku feels his cheeks like they're on fire, which is probably answer enough for Ida. He doesn't like that kind of stuff. I've seen him there just a handful of times and only because All Might insists. Oh, all right, Izuku says, trying not to look disappointed, but the truth is that he'd like to see Bakugo again. They need to talk. I could send him a message for you. That's basically my job, Ida reminds him, and Izuku can't help but grin at his kindness. But he doesn't want to make Bakugo feel uncomfortable or agree just because Izuku insisted. What if he doesn't want to see him now? No, it's okay. For a moment it looks like Ida is going to say something else, but he suddenly nods before leaving. That's when Izuku starts feeling anxious, because he's not sure how it's going to go. After all, he doesn't know a lot of gods and he doesn't have fancy clothes. Except that beautiful dress Bakugo gave him. Maybe he should wear that one. Feeling suddenly nervous, Izuku starts making flower crowns appear without actually meaning to. It's okay, everything's going to be fine. He should focus on the fact that he'll get to see All Might again and maybe Aizawa too, although he's almost sure the god of strategy and wisdom doesn't like that kind of stuff either, so who knows. If this is about the annual party or celebration or whatever, you know you're wasting your time. He never attends, Mina says, but leads Ida to the throne room anyway. Besides, he's not in the mood for anything right now, not since our queen left. Ida quirks up both brows at the last word, but chooses not to question it. Instead he approaches directly to the throne, where the god of the dead is looking quite defeated suddenly. Mina has told him multiple times to go pay a visit to his beloved Midoriya, but he's too stubborn to listen. All Might wants you to. I'm not interested. Bakugo cuts him off, and when Ida pinches the bridge of his nose and takes a deep breath, Mina doesn't blame him at all for looking so done with the king. I'm not supposed to say anything about the other guests, but Ida hesitates. He looks like someone who likes following rules, so it must be difficult for him. Midoriya Izuku has been invited too. Not even trying to pretend anymore, Bakugo perks up immediately and stares at the messenger like he's suddenly way more interesting now. I'll be there, he blurts out, to which Ida just nods. He's about to leave when Bakugo clears his throat. Wait, did you see him? How is he? Is he all right? He looks fine, Ida says, clearly reluctant to say too much about another god. Then, after having an internal battle with himself, he adds, he asked about you. He doesn't give Bakugo the opportunity to ask more questions because he leaves immediately, mumbling something about having to deliver more invitations. Mina watches Bakugo's expression change into something more soft and vulnerable. It's amazing what love can do to an explosive god with a difficult temperament like him. Do you think he misses me, Pinky? I know he does. His mother assures him he looks beautiful, but Izuku knows that his mother will always say that about him no matter what. At least the dress itself is cute, but it reminds him of his time in the underworld. Still, he's not sure how he's going to get there. Last time he ended up in that place, someone took him. As he reaches his field, he starts getting nervous until he recognizes the dark figure getting closer to him. He beams as soon as he realizes that Aizawa is wearing the flower crown Izuku made for him. It looks good on him, even though he's wearing black clothes. What are you doing here? I'm taking you to the party, Aizawa says, looking like he regrets it already. Really? Izuku grins. I thought you didn't like these kind of things. I don't, but someone has to make sure the problem child doesn't get in trouble, Aizawa tells him, offering his arm. Izuku nods, immediately making himself a flower crown too before taking the god's arm. Besides, I have a feeling you'll need a chaperone, Aizawa says, already rolling his eyes at the thought. Especially since your suitors will probably be there too. My what? Aizawa shakes his head, refusing to say another word about that. Of course, that doesn't make Izuku feel nervous at all. It'll be fine, besides, he'll get to see All Might again. Izuku is nervous. There are many gods he's never seen before, and he's not sure they'll be happy to see someone like him in the Olympus. Noticing his distress, Aizawa puts a hand on his shoulder and smiles at him. It helps him relax until he notices a lot of them are looking in their direction. Trust me, they're just staring at the flower crown upon my head, the god of strategy sighs, like he's tired of it already. If you want I can? No, I told you I'd wear it, Aizawa cuts him off. The crown is pretty, they're just staring because I never wear things like this. Did you make them? A goddess Aizawa introduces as Yaoyorozu approaches Izuku with a mortal girl behind her. The girl looks shy. Why is? Izuku nods, realizing that the goddess is smiling at him. Great. Can you make one for me and my girlfriend? Sure. The green-haired demigod perks up, feeling a lot better already. The mortal girl's name is Jiro, and even though she's shy, Izuku realizes that she's a very good person. Izuku doesn't notice Aizawa's absence until he's done with both flower crowns. But when he does, he starts getting a little bit concerned, at least until a pair of muscled arms lift him from the ground with ease. Young Midoriya, I'm glad you decided to attend. It's difficult to believe that All Might himself wants him around. Thanks for inviting me. He chuckles, feeling himself relax almost completely. I saw that you were making this flower crowns for my guests, and I want one too, young man. Izuku nods happily and with a little bit of amusement as All Might has to kneel on the ground for Izuku to place a flower crown upon his head. You should let him spend time with younger gods, Aizawa comments, startling Izuku a bit when he appears with a glass of wine in his hand. Are you calling me old, Shota? All Might laughs amusedly. It's one of those laughs that sound like thunder, but in a good way. He puts a heavy arm around Aizawa's shoulder while the other god rolls his eyes. You're right, he should make friends. Izuku is about to say that he's more than happy to spend time with the two of them, when a god with dark clothes and a shadow following him around approaches him and introduces himself as Tokoyami Fumikichi. Izuku likes him and his shadow too. They're very friendly towards him. Jiro and Yaoyorozu join them a little bit afterwards, and finally Izuku has the opportunity to talk to someone who can understand him. It was difficult at first, Jiro admits, looking around shyly. Being the only mortal here is a little bit intimidating, but most of Momo's friends have always made me feel welcome. I think you'll be fine. Izuku nods and can't help but notice that even though Yaoyorozu is distracted talking with Tokoyami about something else, she takes Jiro's hand in hers and intertwines their fingers together. Besides, it's fine because Momo is always here for me, she says, cheeks turning slightly pink at her own words. I'm glad you have someone who loves you that much, Izuku mumbles sincerely, feeling happy for her. What I'm trying to say is that you don't have to worry, they're good gods, Jiro whispers next to him, and then, after a little bit of hesitation, she adds, of course, there are exceptions, but you shouldn't think too much about them. Izuku can't help but worry nonetheless, but gets easily distracted by the sound of a voice he had missed a lot. Izuku! Despite everything that happened, he turns around with a huge smile on his face as soon as he sees Bakugo. Kaken! Izuku is not entirely sure who approached whom, but now they're right in front of each other. Bakugo's initial soft smile disappears in that moment before he looks at the ground. I'm truly sorry for what I did to you, Izuku. It breaks the demigod's heart to see his friend like that. He looks absolutely devastated, like he's in pain. You already apologized for? It wasn't enough. Bakugo cuts him off, shaking his head. I took you from your mom. None of you deserve that. And listen, it's okay if you don't want to see me again, I understand. I'll leave if you want me to so you can enjoy the party, but I needed to see you to apologize properly, Izuku. To Izuku, it's been way too long without seeing him. He's missed him a lot and has had time to think about what happened. He smiles, and when he realizes Bakugo can't see him, he cradles the god's face in his hands to make him look up at him. I've already forgiven you, Kaken. He mumbles sincerely before pulling him down because Bakugo is so tall, finally pressing their foreheads together. I don't think I do, sir. Do you want to dance, Kaken? Izuku cuts him off before the blonde can start feeling terrible about what happened again. The music is already filling the room and the green-haired demigod can see everyone dancing around them. Yes. I'm keeping my eyes on you, Aizawa warns Bakugo, glaring at him and startling both Izuku and the god of the dead in the process. I understand, Bakugo nods, looking from him to Izuku. And then, after a couple of seconds, he adds, with a smirk, is that a flower crown, sensei? None of your business. Aizawa huffs, prompting Izuku to giggle. Besides, I told you not to call me that. I'm not your sensei anymore. Oh, do you want a flower crown, Kaken? I can make you one too. Izuku says happily, although he isn't sure why Aizawa looks amused out of the sudden. I'm not sure it fits my style. Bakugo stops when he watches Izuku nod. Okay, I understand. He smiles, trying not to look too disappointed. I changed my mind, he mumbles after a second. You can make me as many flower crowns as you want, you little flower nerd. Izuku giggles, noticing that his heart feels warm and fuzzy again. It's been a long time since he felt something like that. He had missed that feeling a lot. He makes a special crown for Bakugo, with orange flowers that look really good on him, considering he's constantly wearing black clothes. There. Izuku takes Bakugo's hand when he's done, pulling him towards the dance floor. Now let's go. Bakugo is blushing, but Izuku doesn't think too much about it, especially after he feels the god's hands on his waist. I bet I look ridiculous, Bakugo comments, although he doesn't really look that upset. Izuku notices a glimmer of amusement in his red eyes. I have a reputation. How am I going to look intimidating with flowers on my head? Trust me, Kaken, you still are intimidating. Izuku assures him, noticing the frown upon his face. However, he can't stop himself from smiling. Then why are you laughing at me, flower nerd? Bakatsuki says, trying to look irritated, but it seems Izuku's smile is contagious. For some reason, Izuku can't see him as Bakugo anymore, not even in his head. They've been through a couple of things together. He's just Katsuki now. But it's alright because Katsuki calls him by his first name anyway. I'm not laughing. Izuku chuckles as Katsuki spins him before pulling him closer to his chest. You're such a terrible liar, Izuku, but the other god is grinning from ear to ear now. Well, at least one of us looks good with flowers on their head. But you have always looked beautiful anyway. They both slow down and Izuku can't help but blush to the tip of his ears at the compliment. Suddenly, he's more aware of their proximity and his heart is beating incredibly fast now. Your flowers are blooming. Blooming? Izuku blinks a couple of times. Why are the flowers upon his head blooming now? Are they reacting to his emotions? What is he doing here? He doesn't belong in here. Izuku is not sure if he's entirely grateful by Endeavor's interruption. But Katsuki is definitely not, considering the way he pushes Izuku behind himself while he growls at the other god. What do you mean he doesn't belong? Aizawa bares his teeth at the sun god, surprising Izuku with his reaction. He usually looks calm and collected, even in stressful situations. I invited him, All Might says firmly, almost like he's daring Endeavor to say something else while keeping a hand on Aizawa's shoulder. He's always belonged here. He's not even a— Shut up, old man, Todoroki snaps at his own father. He keeps glaring at Endeavor until his eyes meet Izuku's. However, his expression doesn't soften because he also notices the blonde god in front of him. What are you trying to do to Izuku, Bakugo? Let him go. Everything turns into chaos right afterwards. Fuck off, half and half. Don't talk to my son like that. I don't need you to defend me, old man. At least they're not physically fighting each other, but the sight of everyone yelling has started to make Izuku feel distressed. This is his fault. Endeavor is clearly angry because Izuku is in the Olympus. You belong here. Aizawa's voice startles him. Izuku wasn't expecting to have the god at side again. But the hand on his shoulder is definitely reassuring. At that, Katsuki also stops growling at Todoroki and gets closer to the demigod instead. Are you alright, Izuku? I'm fine, Kaken. Maybe I should go. That'd be for the best, Endeavor says at the same time everyone else cuts Izuku off with a loud, no. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. All Might speaks then, and for a moment Izuku thinks he's talking to him, but then he realizes he's actually looking directly at Endeavor. Me? How dare? Well, you certainly deserve it, after ruining everything with your presence, Aizawa comments with a venom in his voice Izuku didn't believe he was capable of until now. He always looked so calm and collected before. Not like I wanted to be here, the god huffs, glaring at Izuku again. Let's go, Shoto. I'm staying, if All Might allows it, Todoroki says instead, ignoring his father's outraged expression to look at the king of the gods and then at Izuku with a pleading expression. Just behave, Aizawa cuts in, before All Might can say anything else. And the same goes to you, Bakugo. What? But I didn't start it, TSH. Fine. Izuku feels a little bit uncomfortable, thinking about how everything could have been avoided if he didn't. Stop that, Izuku, Katsuki whispers, leaning closer to him before pulling him into his arms. I know that face. You deserve to be here more than he does. As much as I dislike to agree with him, Todoroki tells him, ignoring Katsuki's grimace. He's right, Izuku. Thank you. The demigod smiles, looking around himself and noticing that All Might and Aizawa are nodding too. You're very kind to me. I'd like to dance with you, Izuku. Not in a million years, you half-an. Careful, young man, this time is All Might who interrupts Katsuki. I can kick you out too if I want. The god of the dead grimaces before crossing his arms over his. I was dancing with Izuku first. He's right, Shoto. I'll finish this dance with him and then I'll dance with you. Todoroki nods as Katsuki growls and pulls Izuku closer to him again. Why do you want to dance with an extra like him? He's my friend, Izuku whispers before giggling when Katsuki puts both of his hands on the demigod's waist. It feels good because Katsuki's hands are always warm. Your flowers are blooming again, Katsuki observes, although now he sounds very pleased at that. Izuku's face turns pink in seconds. He's not exactly sure what it means, but he knows the flowers upon his head are reacting to his emotions. His time with Katsuki ends up too soon for his liking, but Izuku knows he needs to talk with Todoroki and he's going to use their time dancing to do that. "Hi," Todoroki mumbles as soon as Izuku is in his arms. He looks flustered, although Izuku is not sure if it's because they're finally dancing or due to Aizawa's warning glare he's throwing at him at the moment. "I'll be keeping an eye on you too." "I understand," Todoroki assures the other god, looking a little bit more pale, prompting Izuku to chuckle. However, Izuku stops quickly, silently reminding himself that he shouldn't be smiling at the moment. He needs to have a serious conversation with his friend. "Stop accusing Kaken of trying to hurt me, Shoto," he whispers, not knowing how else to initiate that particular conversation. "You were rude earlier. He was just dancing with me." "I'm sorry," Todoroki sighs, making Izuku spin once and smiling after hearing him giggle. "Alright, turns out it's a little bit difficult to have a serious conversation like that. Just don't do it again." "I don't trust him." Izuku knows he can't make both his friends like each other, no matter how much he wants them to get along. "Even if you don't, spending time with him is my decision to make. No matter what you think about what happened before," Izuku says. "I forgave him a while ago." For a moment it looks like Todoroki is about to protest, but he just nods instead. "It won't happen again." Finally, Izuku relaxes into his arms and lets his friend pull him even closer. It's not like they start getting along, but at least they tolerate each other while Izuku is with them. He has decided that he danced enough, at least for the time being, and now he just wants to spend time with his friends. Katsuki is right next to him. He's a little bit grumpy, but at least he knows when to behave. Izuku is just happy to have seen him again because the truth is that he missed him a lot. He's also making new friends in the Olympus, which is a plus and something he didn't think it could be possible before. Now that he doesn't have Endeavor glaring at him the whole time, Izuku can finally say he's enjoying himself. "Can I pay you a visit soon?" Katsuki leans closer to whisper next to his ear. Izuku blushes at the proximity, but when he recovers, he finds himself nodding. "Of course." He giggles, feeling suddenly very warm inside. "I'd love to show you my field now. I think you're going to like it." Now that things are going well, Izuku thinks that maybe he should give Katsuki the pomegranate back. It clearly doesn't belong in the mortal world, because it hasn't changed in the slightest since Izuku took it, but at the same time he thinks it'll be better if he keeps it for a while. Smiling softly, Katsuki pulls Izuku into his arms. At first the demigod thinks the blonde wants to dance again, but he just holds Izuku against his chest for a couple of seconds. At least until Todoroki clears his throat and Katsuki growls at him over the green-haired demigod's shoulder. Izuku rolls his eyes, but instead of worrying, this time he just chuckles and pulls away from Katsuki to look at his other friend. "What is it, Shoto? I want a flower crown too." "Sure thing," Izuku says, happily getting closer to him. Behind him, Katsuki growls. "Kaken." Izuku gets to dance and spend time with a lot of people. Ida turns out to be an excellent dancing partner, but he has so much fun when Yaoyorozu and Jiro decide to dance with him at the same time. "Glad you're enjoying yourself, young man." All Might startles him by appearing behind him at some point. When he turns around he notices that Aizawa is talking with Katsuki and Todoroki and both gods are staring at the ground almost like they're being scolded. Izuku decides to join them, but All Might puts a hand on his shoulder to stop him. "They'll be fine. Besides, I think it's important to let them have this conversation with Shota." The demigod nods, just slightly worried now. By the end of the night, Izuku is completely relaxed again, mostly because both Katsuki and Todoroki haven't yelled at each other in a while and Izuku gets back on the dance floor 2 more times. To dance with All Might and Aizawa respectively. It's the most fun he has had in a while. It's time to go back to his field, but Izuku doesn't lament it because he actually had a great time in the Olympus. Todoroki and Katsuki both want to take Izuku home and start arguing about it until Aizawa steps in and says that the 3 of them can take Izuku back to the mortal realm. The moon is still high in the sky and the field Izuku has been taking care of for most of his life looks like it's been covered in silver thanks to the moonlight. "Thanks for dancing with me, Shoto," Izuku puts his arms around the young god and then adds, in a whisper, "Stop picking fights with Kaken." "Fine. But I still don't like him." "Same here, half and half." Kaken. Todoroki has to go, but he promises to pay him a visit again soon. He doesn't look happy about leaving Izuku with Katsuki, but relaxes a bit when he notices that Aizawa is still there. "Thanks for taking care of me." Izuku beams, taking both of Aizawa's hands in his. "I had a good time. I barely did anything and it's not like I was taking care of you, problem child," the god argues, but he's trying really hard not to smile back at Izuku. He looks a little bit flustered. Izuku has noticed that he likes to appear cold and detached, but he actually cares a lot about everyone. He pulls Aizawa into a hug and gives him a kiss on the cheek, even though he has no right to see him as family. Izuku likes to think that his father would do the same for him, if he hadn't left his mother. This time Aizawa smiles back at him, even if it's just for a few seconds. "Fine. I'll leave you with him, but you have to promise you'll behave." He narrows his eyes, glaring at Katsuki over Izuku's shoulder. "I'll only stay a few minutes," Katsuki says. And to Izuku's surprise, he seems like he's actually listening to Aizawa. He wonders then what exactly he told Katsuki and Todoroki back in the Olympus. "If you need me, just say my name out loud and I'll come," Aizawa says to Izuku. "And don't get in trouble." "I'll try," Izuku promises, giggling as he watches Aizawa rolling his eyes at him before disappearing. A gasp escapes from his lips as soon as he feels Katsuki's arms around him. Izuku would like to see his face, but the king of the underworld is hugging him from behind. "What is it, Kaken? I missed you." "I know, you told me. And I missed you too. But you still have no idea how much it hurt." Finally, Izuku manages to turn around into Katsuki's embrace. He cups his face with both hands and notices the tears in those red eyes. "You can visit me as many times as you want, Kaken." The god nods, smiling fondly at him before burying his face in the curve of Izuku's neck. This time, Izuku knows the flowers upon his head are blooming again. He feels really happy at that moment. Maybe his flowers react to his happiness. "I won't screw up this time, Izuku. Stop being so hard on yourself." The demigod stops and his cheeks turn slightly pink when he feels Katsuki's lips pressed against his forehead. "Good night, Izuku." "Okay guys, let's pretend we don't care about what happened because otherwise he won't tell us a thing," Mina says, already trying to get Kaminari and Kirishima away from the entrance to the palace. Of course her friends are terrible at pretending they're distracted in their daily activities. Kaminari is whistling, moving around the throne room in the most ridiculous attempt to look busy, while Kirishima is trying to calm Dynamite down. At least the three-headed dog is giving him something to do. Now, if their boss comes back in a good mood, he'll easily dismiss his friend's weird behavior. But if something happened in the Olympus? The door to the throne room opens with a loud noise and for a moment Mina worries about Bakugo, until she notices that he's trying to hold back a smile. Dynamite rushes towards his owner, wagging his huge tail happily, and the king of the underworld spreads his arms to hug one of his heads at a time. Something must have gone really well for him to be in such a good mood. "Did you see Midoriya?" Kirishima can't help but ask as Kaminari drops all pretense and runs towards his usually explosive boss to hear the whole story. It's not very common to see Bakugo smiling freely, but that's exactly what happens then. "I danced with him." He can't help it, it's like the grin is fighting to stay on his face. It's ridiculous how in love he is, although Mina doesn't blame him. Midoriya is truly adorable. "Tell us everything, Baku bro." He does, and it seems that everything went well, to some extent. Mina feels angry when she hears that Endeavor tried to get Midoriya kicked out of the Olympus. By the way Kirishima frowns and Kaminari starts insulting the sun god, it seems they think exactly the same. At least All Might and Aizawa were there for him. It seems the sweet demigod has two dads now, but the most terrifying one is Aizawa. And, of course, it seems that Todoroki is not going to give up on Midoriya anytime soon. It's okay, Bakugo can deal with that. Besides, it looks like Aizawa doesn't disapprove of him, otherwise he wouldn't have let Bakugo dance with Midoriya. "When is our queen coming back?" Kaminari asks, looking very excited already. Even Dynamite knows what they're talking about because he wags his tail again. "Not anytime soon," Bakugo grumbles, looking slightly less happy, prompting Kirishima to cover Kaminari's mouth so he doesn't say anything else. I'm not going to ask him to come, not after what I did. But you can visit him, right? Mina blurts out before she can stop herself. She's way too invested in their relationship not to worry about what happens to them. Yeah, Bakugo grins. The nerd said I could see him again. Great. We can work with that. What do you mean we, Pinky? Oh, calm down, Blasty. She rolls her eyes at the way he suspiciously stares in her direction. We all know you could really use some help when it comes to wooing our sweet Midoriya. Instead of exploding, Bakugo chooses not to protest or argue for once, which means he really wants a little bit of help. Do you think I have a chance? You do, but you need to be patient, Mina says carefully. The next time you visit you have to bring him a gift. A courting gift, Bakugo smiles, immediately understanding what she's trying to say. Exactly, show him how much you care about him. Sweep him off his feet, Baku bro. Mina just hopes Todoroki doesn't get the same idea. He puts the flowers on his crown back on the field. They attach to the ground like they have never been away from it. Izuku stares at them and then wonders about what happened in the Olympus. He's still not sure exactly why his flowers were blooming every time he danced with Katsuki. What does it mean? Although his heart beats like crazy inside his chest and he feels all warm and fuzzy inside every time he thinks about it. It's all right. He can figure it out another day. Right now he has to go back to his mother and tell her he's completely fine. His mom gives him a hug that lasts a couple of seconds and a kiss on the cheek before she starts making dinner for the both of them. With a grin on his face, Izuku decides to tell her only part of what happened there. She doesn't need to know about Endeavor at all. He's glad when he sees Uraraka the very next day. They hang out for a while and walk towards the stream where they met for the first time. Despite how terrified and scared for her he was that day, Izuku remembers the day with a fond smile on his face, not only because he met her, but due to the fact that he visited the Underworld for the first time. He misses his friends from the Underworld and Dynamite too, but he also misses the place. Mortals have a very negative concept of the Underworld, at least the majority of them. They think of it as a place for suffering and sadness, but it's nothing like that at all. Sometimes the pomegranate in his room looks too tempting, even though part of him knows there'll be consequences if he takes a bite. Are you all right? Fortunately, Uraraka's voice snaps him out of it. Just, sorry. It's okay, you don't have to apologize. It's obvious that you were thinking about something else, but it's fine. Uraraka makes a dismissive gesture with her hand, although she still looks a little bit worried. Feeling a little bit flustered still, Izuku decides to tell her about his time in the Olympus. There's a mixture of emotions on her face, but she listens patiently from the beginning to the end. Then proceeds to curse Endeavor in such a way, it makes Izuku blush. She definitely knows a lot of unique and creative swear words that she knows exactly how to use. Your goth dad should have kicked him out himself, Uraraka comments out of the sudden, making Izuku choke on air. My what? I mean the god of strategy, Uraraka explains. He obviously cares about you. All Might too. Izuku shakes his head even though it pleases him to hear that, however, he knows they're not. They probably have more important things to do than to care about him. Now, about that flower crown, she continues, looking not that pleased this time. Obviously I don't know a lot about your kind of powers or gods and demigods in general, but if they react to your emotions then I think you might have a crush on the underworld grumpy god. As soon as she says it, Izuku's face turns into an interesting shade of red and his heart beats like it wants to get out of his chest. However, he refuses to believe it. Katsuki and he are friends again. He'd probably ruin their friendship with his ridiculous feelings. Besides, flowers blooming doesn't have to mean that exactly. Maybe he just lost control of his abilities because he was busy dancing with Katsuki. There's nothing else to it. I'm still Team Todoroki, by the way. Izuku blinks back at her in utter confusion. What? Team Todoroki? Shoto is my friend too. That's not what I was trying to say, but it's fine. She changes the subject and walks back to Izuku's house with him. She's good friends with his mom now and wants to pay her a visit too. Inko convinces her to stay for lunch. He doesn't have time to think about what Uraraka said, or maybe he doesn't want to. Because Katsuki appears in the field a few days later. Izuku doesn't notice, But his lips immediately quirk up into a huge smile and he rushes towards Katsuki like it's been months instead of days since they last saw each other. Kaken, the god of the dead, smiles back at him, although he looks a little bit flustered out of the sudden. He rubs the back of his neck with one hand as he makes appear something with the other. For you, he mumbles as he hands Izuku a dark rose. This is a flower that has grown in the underworld. It doesn't change and it'll never die. Izuku understands nature, especially plants and flowers, and he can feel the energy coming from that rose. It's older than most of the things around him. He's absolutely fascinated and happy with his gift. He knows he doesn't have to use his abilities on that one to keep it fresh. The pomegranate is just the same. Thank you. Izuku beams before jumping into Katsuki's arms. I love it. When he takes a few steps back, he realizes that Katsuki's cheeks are slightly pink now. You're such a flower nerd, the god says, staring fondly at him. They sit under the shadow of a tree and Izuku listens as Katsuki tells him how Kaminari, Kirishima and Ishido are doing now. He's seen Ishido a couple of times since he left the underworld, but it's nice to know a little bit more about the other two. How's my sweet Dynamite doing? He asks then because he can't help it. He misses the hellhound terribly. He keeps whining because he wants you to come back, Katsuki admits as his cheeks turn even more red for some reason. You have bewitched him and now he can't live without you. He says the last bit as he stares into Izuku's eyes. The green-haired demigod feels his face warm suddenly and his heart beats inside his chest in a way that would make him worry if he was completely mortal. Maybe I could pay him a visit someday, he mumbles, feeling flustered. Why is he so nervous? This is Katsuki, his friend. He'd love that. The god of the underworld leans closer and takes Izuku's hand in his, prompting the demigod to blush even more. Hey nerd. You're doing the thing with the flowers again? Izuku feels confused for a moment. He's not wearing a flower crown this time, but when he turns around he realizes that he made the flowers around them bloom without even noticing it. Maybe Uraraka is right. He probably has feelings for Katsuki and that could be a huge problem because Izuku refuses to ruin their friendship. He needs to do something about it. There's no need to panic. Izuku is sure it's nothing to worry about. Katsuki is back in the underworld now and even though Izuku already misses him, being away from him will do him good. Now that he's almost sure he has a crush on his friend, the demigod can deal with it. He doesn't want to ruin their friendship, so mention it to him is out of question. He just needs to convince his heart that Katsuki is his friend and nothing more. Which will be easy because Izuku knows the king of the underworld will never want someone like him as his significant other. That day he gets himself busy. He tends to his field and walks towards the village and the houses nearby to see if anyone needs assistance with their crops. He visits a couple of families. Most of them recognize him as a god and sometimes pray to him, even though Izuku has told them he's just a minor deity. After a couple of days of trying to help as many mortals as he can, Izuku gets a visit from his friend Todoroki. It's obvious he still feels bad for all those times that tried to pick a fight with Katsuki because he doesn't look at Izuku in the eye. It's almost like he's afraid of not being welcomed. I told you I forgave you already, Izuku mumbles with a soft smile on his face. Just don't do it again. I promise I won't be the one who starts it again, Todoroki assures him, which is not exactly what Izuku was hoping for, but at least it's progress. They relax for a while. Izuku keeps checking on the oldest trees to make sure they don't die and makes sure to heal one that had been struck by lightning. I want you to meet my family, Todoroki says after a while, looking slightly nervous. His cheeks have turned pink, but this time he makes sure to look directly at Izuku. Izuku gets nervous too, but he can tell his friend really wants him to go see his family, that he can't help but agree to it almost immediately. Great. Let's go. Right now? Izuku looks at himself and tries to fix his hair a little before taking Todoroki's hand in his. He just hopes they're not like Endeavor because if that's the case then they won't like Izuku either. Turns out Fuyumi, Todoroki's older sister, lives in a little house among mortals, which is a good sign in Izuku's opinion. Or maybe he's just being hopeful. Not only Izuku meets Fuyumi, but also Natsuo, Todoroki's older brother, and Rei, his mother. I'm so glad to finally meet you, Izuku, Rei smiles, holding both of the demigod's hands in his, making him feel flustered. Shoto talks about you all the time. Mom, please. Todoroki says, face turning into an interesting shade of red. He really does, Natsuo nods, ignoring his little brother's frown. Izuku this. Izuku that. Natsuo. Even though Todoroki looks embarrassed, as soon as Fuyumi starts giggling, his shoulders relax immediately. Natsuo says something else about Todoroki coming back after meeting Izuku for the first with a smile so huge, it confused everyone that day. Suddenly everyone bursts into laughter. Izuku does too because he can tell Todoroki's siblings like to tease him, but they clearly care about him deeply. Izuku is suddenly really glad that Endeavor is not the only family Todoroki has. They have dinner together. Fuyumi is a great cook and Izuku can't get enough of her food. I really hope you come pay us a visit again, Izuku, Rei says before pulling the green-haired demigod into a hug. And I hope you can consider us family someday, Fuyumi adds, making Izuku blush. Honestly, it's like none of them are related to Endeavor at all, which is a good thing. I'll take you back home, Todoroki mumbles with a worried expression as he watches Natsuo trying to say something too. Thank you so much for your hospitality. By the time they're back in his field, Izuku feels a lot lighter. The problems he had a couple of days ago seem really small now. Surely, nothing to worry about. I had a great time, Shoto, he says, trying not to overthink everything this time. Me too, Todoroki mumbles, rubbing the back of his neck. I know they all adore you already. Izuku blushes, but he makes a dismissive gesture with his hand anyway. Of course his friend would say something like that, even if it's not true. They just met me. Shoto looks away, turning slightly pink as he says something unintelligible, something Izuku doesn't quite hear. Shoto. Izuku stops when Todoroki takes his hand and kisses the back of it gently. I have to go, but I'll be back soon with a gift. Before Izuku can tell him there's no need to give him anything, Shoto disappears with the last light coming from the horizon. Trying not to smile too much, he remembers the black rose Katsuki gave it to him a couple of days ago. Why are his friends suddenly giving him gifts? Perhaps he should give them something back too. Izuku suddenly wishes there was a way to communicate with Ishido directly. He still is going to try to contact Ida, and even though he talked to him in the Olympus and found out he's a very nice god, Izuku still feels like he's not in the position to ask him for a favor because Izuku is just a demigod. But he has to do it because he wants to deliver gifts to the immortals who were nice to him while he was staying there. He has made a natural chewing toy, 3 actually, for dynamite. It'll repair itself so the cute hellhound can play with it as many times as he wants. He has a lot of flowers and flower crowns for his friends and a very special necklace for Katsuki. That one doesn't have any flowers but leaves, orange ones because Izuku has always thought that's Katsuki's color. It also has a very special type of thorn for protection. Izuku designed it himself and applied a little bit of his powers to make it harmless to the user. By the time Ida answers to his call, Izuku is nervous and slightly blushing. The messenger is nice. He's a powerful and very efficient god who's polite with everyone, so Izuku is not flustered because of him. He's nervous because he hasn't gotten over the crush he has for the king of the underworld. And, if Izuku is being honest, part of him hasn't made a real effort to get rid of it because having a crush feels nice and warm. It's like endless spring inside his heart. That's it, Midoriya? Izuku has to blink a couple of times in order to focus on the god in front of him. Yes, just tell her I'd like to see her. He nods, smiling at Ida before handing him a flower. There's no need. Ida assures him, moving his arm up and down repeatedly. This is basically my duty. You don't have to give me anything in return. But I want to because you're my friend now. Izuku insists, beaming at him. Thanks. You're welcome. Izuku doesn't expect her to respond the same day, much less to visit him herself just a couple of minutes later. He gets startled when she appears on his field, but gets over it quickly and rushes towards his friend to hug her. I'm glad to see you again too, she chuckles, pulling him a little bit closer before taking a few steps back. Everyone misses you. I miss them too, Izuku nods, beaming as he adds, quite excited, would you take me to the underworld to pay them a visit? It doesn't have to be today. I'll take you now. She grins back. Really? But I don't want to. I mean we can schedule so I don't interrupt? Nonsense. She cuts him off, taking his hand. You're always welcome in the underworld. But let's go then. There's a sensation of familiarity as soon as he opens his eyes and realizes he's back exactly where he met Ishido for the first time. It's been a while and he'd be lying if he didn't admit he missed that place more than anything, or maybe it's not just the place. For a moment it feels like home. Do you want to go to the castle? Not right now, he blurts out, looking around excitedly. I have a lot of flower crowns for the little kids. Let's find them. As he did back when he first stayed in the underworld, Izuku spends a lot of time finding kids and putting flower crowns upon their heads to cheer them up. They start calling him Queen, like the other ones did. He's still not sure why children always mistake him for the Queen of the underworld. Maybe they sense that we need a queen. Ishido mumbles after Izuku says that last bit out loud and he can't help but blush when his friend winks at him. But I'm not. He stops suddenly. The painful idea of Katsuki looking for and eventually finding some pretty goddess to marry crosses his mind. Izuku shakes his head. No, it's fine. Katsuki is his friend and he deserves to be happy. He should be happy for him as well. He really needs to get rid of his silly crush on him. Are you a... Izuku? Kaken? As soon as Izuku says his name, the god of the dead rushes towards him and takes him in his arms as if they hadn't seen each other in ages. I thought you hated this place? I don't. Izuku pushes him gently so he can see his face. I told you I wanted to go back. You did, but I brought you a gift. The demigod cuts him off because he doesn't like to see him sad. He knows his gift will cheer him up. I made this necklace for you. It won't hurt you and you can use it as protection against. Katsuki puts it on immediately. He looks from the gift to Izuku like it's the best thing that could have happened to him. Is this in response to the gift I brought you the other day? Well, of course. Katsuki's face lights up. He looks really handsome when he's absolutely happy. He takes Izuku's face in his hands and presses their foreheads together, prompting Izuku to blush. I'll give you your second gift soon, Izuku. Second? Why would he give him a second gift? Izuku is suddenly confused, but he doesn't have time to ask about it because Katsuki pulls him closer again and makes them appear inside the castle. Dynamite has missed you a lot. Just right after he says that a huge hellhound comes running down the stairs, wagging his tail. He must have picked up Izuku's scent as soon as he entered the castle. Oi, be careful. Katsuki warns the dog. It's all right, Kaken. Izuku smiles right before Dynamite reaches him. No, he doesn't manage to push him to the ground because Izuku is way stronger than he looks. He can help but chuckle as he tries to give all three heads the attention they deserve and as much pats as Dynamite wants. After a while, Izuku finally gives the dog the toy he made for him. Midoriya. Both Kirishima and Kaminari embrace him at the same time, prompting Izuku to grin. I've missed you guys. Are you going to stay? Kaminari asks, almost hopeful. I just came to pay you a visit. All right, that's enough, Katsuki growls, before pushing Kirishima and Kaminari away from Izuku. When he feels Katsuki's hand on his waist, Izuku is glad he doesn't have his own flower crown on him, otherwise it would have given him away. His cheeks turn slightly pink though. Come on, Bakubro, don't be that possessive. Midoriya is our friend. Shut up. Izuku can't help but chuckle as soon as he hears them arguing and notices Ishido rolling her eyes at them. He had missed this. All of it. And he has the feeling that even though he knows he has to go back to the mortal realm soon, this time it'd be even more difficult to leave his friends. They walk around in the castle for a while as Katsuki tells him how everyone has been doing since Izuku left. How about you? The demigod asks, mostly to tease his friend. Did you miss me? He already knows his friend did actually miss him. They had talked about it, but Izuku is just having fun at the moment, so he doesn't expect an actual response from anyone. Are you kidding me? Kaminari rolls his eyes, turning his head towards Izuku like he can't quite believe he just said that. He was so grumpy and sad all the time. Not to mention how bad he felt at first for lying to you. Dunce face. Before the king of the dead can get dangerously closer to Kaminari, Izuku puts a hand on Katsuki's shoulder to stop him. As usual, he relaxes immediately and turns around. Katsuki is blushing. Izuku finds it absolutely adorable. He's so happy he doesn't have his flower crown and he's not carrying any at the moment because he's sure all of them would bloom under his touch. He knows he should be working on getting rid of his crush, but now it's not the time. Izuku takes one of Katsuki's hands and pulls him slightly closer only to touch the god's cheek. I'm here now and I'll be returning here often, if that's all right. There's nothing I want more. Katsuki cuts him off and Izuku honestly doesn't notice, but suddenly they are completely alone. You'll always be welcome here. I just want to be with you, Izuku. Nothing is the same without you. No. This is really bad for Izuku's heart. His heart gets his hopes up easily, especially after such beautiful words. No, Izuku shouldn't think about this in any other way than Katsuki just being a good friend to him. Of course, he missed him. They're friends. Besides, it also has to do with the fact that he probably still feels bad about taking Izuku to the underworld and lying to him. This is not going to help with Izuku's crush. Let me show you something. Katsuki smiles before taking Izuku's hand and leading towards a new part of the palace. One Izuku hadn't seen before. There's a room with huge crystal doors that lead to a backyard, and then when they both step outside, Izuku finally realizes that it's actually a huge garden. It's beautiful. Izuku beams, walking among the flowers and touching them with his fingertips. They also seem to react to him even though they're from the underworld. Why didn't you show this to me before? Katsuki starts rubbing the back of his neck as his cheeks turn slightly pink again. Because this wasn't here before. He made this for you? Izuku's heart beats in a funny way inside his chest. He feels warm inside, happy, like he can't contain all that happiness inside him. Does this mean you like it? Katsuki chuckles, making a gesture with his hand towards the flowers around them. They're blooming. Izuku blushes to the tip of his ears. He's so glad Katsuki doesn't know the real reason for that. Yes, it means I like it, Izuku mumbles, feeling bad for not saying the truth, but his friend can't know he has a crush. It'd make things awkward between them. Thank you, Kaken. This means a lot to me. For some reason, the king of the underworld starts smiling and doesn't stop even after they meet their other friends outside. Ashido starts laughing at his expression and both Kirishima and Kaminari look at him like they can't quite believe what's going on. Izuku chuckles, feeling his chest warm and fuzzy, a tiny part of him telling him to stay with them permanently. But he knows he can't. When he comes back to the mortal realm, he gets surprised when he sees Aizawa and All Might himself walking around in his field. Izuku squeaks in delight and rushes towards them to give them both a hug. What are you doing here? Do you need anything from me? Of course not. All Might chuckles. His voice is loud, but not in an annoying way. Izuku finds himself looking up at him until his neck hurts a little and is suddenly reminded of how tall and huge the god is. We just wanted to see you again, Midoriya. Shota is always worried about you. Izuku smiles at the god with the dark tunic only to find him looking away, almost like he's slightly embarrassed. You're prone to get in trouble. I'm just trying to avoid another conflict, Aizawa says, making a dismissive gesture with his hand. All Might laughs again, to which Aizawa glares at him in response. We wanted to make sure you're all right, All Might says, ignoring the other god. Izuku hugs them both again, purposely trying not to notice the way Aizawa rolls his eyes, although Aizawa still hugs the demigod back. He tells them both about his friends, his visit to the Todoroki family, and his quick trip to the underworld. Aizawa tenses a bit during Izuku's story, but relaxes when the young demigod smiles at him. All Might even puts a hand on the gloomy god's shoulder. It's fine. You know they care about him. I think that's part of the problem, Toshinori. Aizawa mumbles, confusing Izuku a bit. When he turns around, he looks even more serious than a couple of minutes ago. You let me know if Enji gives you any trouble, alright? You mean Endeavor? Izuku blinks. When they both nod, he adds, why would he? He doesn't like you getting close to his son, Aizawa explains simply. But don't mind that, All Might says, grinning at Izuku. You just tell us if he ever comes here. Thank you for taking care of me. Izuku says then, and before Aizawa can say anything else, he takes them by the arms and leads them to his house. His mother is more than happy to invite them in and make dinner for them. Izuku tries not to chuckle when he notices that they both act shy around his mother. Izuku looks around and for a moment he's overwhelmed by strong emotions. He realizes that in a relative short period of time he went from living with his mother and taking care of his fields to having so many friends. He's so grateful for that, it almost feels like he's part of a huge family and he hopes it stays that way for a long time. The next day, Izuku finally sees his friend Uraraka after a while. He has a lot of things he wants to say and it seems she does too. The messenger of the gods has been visiting her lately. They're good friends now. Ida is a good guy, she tells Izuku with a huge smile on her face. The three of you should hang out? That's a great idea. Izuku beams, glad to see his friend happy. He knows Ida is great because he's been nothing but kind to him. Izuku even danced with him once in the Olympus. We'll make a proper plan later, she says, making a dismissive gesture with her hand. Now tell me what you've been doing. Izuku starts by talking about Todoroki's family, his siblings and his mother and how they all seemed really happy to meet him. I'm glad his father wasn't there, he says after a while. I think he hates me. That doesn't matter, Uraraka says, narrowing her eyes at the mention of Todoroki's father. The only thing that matters is what Todoroki feels about you. Although it's really nice to have his family's approval as well. Indeed. Izuku is glad they approve of him as Todoroki's friend. Has Todoroki told you something important lately? Uraraka asks, with a curious yet amused expression on her face. Important? I don't think so, Izuku says, getting slightly worried for a moment. He just wanted me to meet his family. She looks disappointed at that, but she recovers quickly and keeps asking about his life. When Izuku excitedly tells her he went to the Underworld and visited his friends, the girl doesn't look that enthusiastic anymore. I saw Kaken again, he says, grinning from ear to ear at the memory. And Dynamite was as cute as always. The giant hellhound? She asks as one of her brows quirks up, incredulous. That's what you're calling cute? You'd say the same if you met him. Uraraka chuckles, but she kinda admits that she could be persuaded if Dynamite is indeed a good boy. Izuku knows she can't go to the Underworld, but maybe he can take him here so she can meet him one day. What about the flower thingy? Does it keep happening when you're around the god of the dead? You mean flowers blooming? Izuku mumbles, blushing at her words. They're sitting on the grass. Izuku has one hand on the ground and as soon as she mentions Katsuki, flowers bloom around him. Never mind. No need to answer, I get it now, she says, looking around as her friend's blush spreads down his neck. I'm fine. It's okay. I'm sure it'll go away, Izuku stammers, getting slightly nervous. Uraraka sighs, clearly not that happy about the situation, but she doesn't say anything against it. Maybe you should tell him. What? No. Izuku squeaks, flustered. It'll ruin our friendship. You don't know that. Uraraka rolls her eyes, looking at him as if she's talking to a very dense kid. Izuku shakes his head and even though she doesn't agree with him, she decides not to argue with him anymore. What about Todoroki? She says tentatively after a while. What about him? Izuku asks, tilting his head, a little bit confused. How do you feel about him? I like him, he's a very good friend. For some reason, it seems like that's not the answer Uraraka is expecting, but she smiles back at him. I see, she says. But if, one day, he says he needs to tell you something important, please listen to him carefully, alright? Alright, Izuku nods. Of course he'd listen to anything Todoroki wanted to tell him, that's what friends are for after all. Although he has the feeling that Uraraka knows more than what she's telling him. Izuku has noticed that he's happier now. He goes to take care of his field early in the morning, helps the people who live nearby with their crops, heals creatures in need and ends up near the river with a huge grin on his face and a melody inside his heart. By the number of times he has thought about Katsuki, he suspects his crush hasn't vanished yet like he planned. Maybe a time away from the god could do him some good, but the truth is that Izuku doesn't want to stop seeing Katsuki. There must be another way. He's kneeling on the ground, taking some water for his flowers when he perceives a light out of the corner of his eye. Izuku turns around only to drop his vase and gasp when he sees Endeavor in front of him. He looks taller and more intimidating than when he saw him at the party, but perhaps it's because Izuku is kneeling at the moment. I wanted to talk to you, The god doesn't look happy and Izuku starts getting nervous. He rises from the ground quickly and decides to face Endeavor. I want you to stay away from Shoto. Why? What do you mean why? This is what I want. Izuku knows, by all the things Todoroki has told him, that Endeavor loses his temper easily, but it's one thing to hear about it and another one to actually see it. The god growls and is covered in flames for a moment. Izuku takes a few steps back and feels his heart beating in such a way that Izuku feels like he's getting sick. You're not better than a simple mortal. My son shouldn't be spending time with someone like you. Despite being scared, Izuku refuses to let him win. That's his decision to make, not yours. Endeavor growls again. Izuku worries about the trees around. His flames could permanently damage them. Please don't come any closer. But Endeavor doesn't listen. Instinctively, Izuku protects his face with his arms and he hears the god hiss. I thought you were a useless demigod. Izuku blinks as he moves his arms away and he notices that thorns have grown from the ground and they're all around Endeavor's body. They aren't piercing his skin, but if he moves they could probably hurt him. One of them is pointing directly at his chest, right where his heart is. Izuku didn't know he could do that. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Endeavor rolls his eyes, looking disappointed again and sets the thorns on fire to free himself. But the thorns don't disappear, they don't move, they look just as fresh and healthy as they did before the fire. When Endeavor realizes this he stops and only then he starts looking worried. Release me this instant. I don't know how. Izuku closes his eyes, trying to ignore the way Endeavor is yelling at him, but it's difficult. He should call someone. Then he shakes his head, not wanting to bother anyone but also because he doesn't want them to see him like this. Izuku looks down at his own hands, wondering if he's actually dangerous. Suddenly, the messenger is there and Izuku realizes that Endeavor probably called him. He looks from Izuku to the sun's god before smiling at Izuku. It's alright. I know whom to call. Ida doesn't seem scared of him, so Izuku feels a little bit better. Endeavor is still pissed. In the blink of an eye, another god appears. Aizawa, look at what you're stupid. Shut up. The other god growls, baring his teeth at Endeavor before turning around to look at Izuku with a calm expression on his face. It's all right, Midoriya. Everything's going to be fine. Aizawa puts both hands on his shoulders and Izuku feels a lot better immediately. You're safe. He's not going to hurt you. I'm here, I won't let that happen, Aizawa assures him, pulling him into his arms. Part of Izuku wants to tell him that the only dangerous one there is him, but he realizes, as his body relaxes into the embrace, that he was scared of Endeavor. There's a grunt and they both turn around only to watch the thorns receding and going back to the ground, like they were never there. Endeavor looks back at Izuku now that he's free. Aizawa puts himself in the middle of the two while he glares at the other god. You're not as weak as I thought you were, the god observes, ignoring Aizawa. But that doesn't mean I approve of you for my son. Go! Aizawa growls and even though Endeavor doesn't look intimidated he does as the other god says. Izuku doesn't know what to think. He didn't know he had that kind of power, but it worries him not being able to control it. Am I dangerous? I don't want to hurt anyone. You're not dangerous, Midoriya. You just need training. I can train you. Izuku smiles and pulls Aizawa into another hug. This time, the god doesn't protest and hugs him back. Izuku invites Aizawa over to his house again and the god can't refuse because lately he can't say no to anything the green-haired demigod tells him. I'll stay a couple of minutes. Although I do have to talk to your mother about your training. Inko likes Aizawa, mostly because she knows everything that God has done for her son, so she's very kind to him whenever he pays them a visit. As soon as she sees him, she starts making tea for the three of them. Aizawa sits at the table and waits for Izuku to finish telling his mother that he wants to train. Train? Inko gets slightly worried. She usually associates that word with a future conflict. Otherwise, why would he require training? Is it something wrong, Izuku? He hesitates for a second. He considers telling his mother about Endeavor, but she has nothing to do with that and telling her would only worry her for nothing. Besides, Izuku is almost sure Todoroki's father won't do anything like that again. I want to be able to protect myself. Inko looks back at him. She knows him really well and is sure that there's something more to it, but she also finds the response reasonable enough. "Alright, just don't get yourself in trouble," she says, right before pulling her son into her arms. Then she glances at Aizawa for a moment. "I know you have done a lot for him already, but please take care of him." Aizawa nods, with a soft smile on his lips. "About that, Mrs. Midoriya, the first couple of weeks of his training will be here, but later I'll have to take him to the Olympus at least for a few days. Are you okay with that?" Inko nods. "Of course. I trust you. I know you really care about my son." Aizawa stays there for a while and then he goes out with Izuku to explain to him some things about his training. Actually, Izuku is very excited about it and nervous too. Just a few hours ago he had no idea he could do more than making flowers bloom or taking care of trees and crops. "I'll come back here every day for your training. I also have to talk to All Might about this, although I think he'll like the idea. He mentioned something about training you too." Izuku gets flustered. He's so happy now. Turns out All Might have been thinking about him too. Maybe he's not that useless as a demigod as he thought he was. Although he's definitely not going to like what happened with Endeavor. Narrowing his eyes with concern, Izuku takes a step closer to Aizawa. "Do you have to tell him?" "He has to know what happened," the god says, getting slightly angry as he remembers everything. "Besides, Endeavor needs to understand that there are consequences. He doesn't have the right to do whatever he pleases just because he's a god, especially when he's threatening another one." Izuku nods, accepting Aizawa's decision. He then smiles and hugs him again before he leaves. Aizawa rolls his eyes, but he hugs him back. The first few days are difficult. Izuku has no idea how to focus enough to make the thorns appear again. "That's because you were scared," Aizawa explains. "You unconsciously channeled your power in order to protect yourself. That's good in extreme circumstances, but at the same time, it's dangerous. When you let an emotion dictate what you do or how you react, you lose control over yourself." Izuku nods, remembering being scared of himself too, not knowing how to pull back the vines. When you do something with a clear mind, you have control over your own actions. Then Aizawa decides to stop focusing on the vines and asks Izuku to help trees grow for a while and explain out loud how he does it. It's strange at first. He's so used to it he mostly ignores the steps in order to achieve what he wants. "I can feel this tree's energy," he explains, surprised by his own response. "I just give it more to accelerate the process of its growth. I visualize it in my mind." Aizawa nods and just observes what Izuku usually does on a normal day in his own field. The next day, he asks Izuku to make a couple of vines grow from the ground. This time, Izuku is a little bit more prepared for it. It's like any other plant. Nature is Izuku's friend. It has always helped him when he needs it the most. He just needs to be kind and ask gently. The demigod takes a deep breath and focuses on what he can see in front of him. Slowly, a vine grows from the ground and stops when it gets as tall as Izuku. But it's only one and it doesn't have thorns on it. Good. That's progress. Aizawa smiles at Izuku, looking proud. "Now, you have to do that at least 10 times more. It's okay if it doesn't have thorns, at least for now." Izuku ends up exhausted, but he's happy about the results. Not all of the vines are as tall as him, but he manages to get one to curl around a tree. Although, he thinks it was mostly luck, but he gets excited about it nonetheless. It's not going to be easy, but it's satisfying when he manages to get something right. After a week, Katsuki comes to pay him a visit while he's in the middle of a training session. The vines he's managing to make grow are not taller than him, but they have a couple of thorns now. Izuku can even make the vines move a bit. "Oi, Izuku! Kaken!" Suddenly, the vines start growing flowers and the flowers bloom the closer the god of the dead gets. Aizawa's brows quirk up with curiosity as he looks at Izuku, and the green-haired demigod immediately blushes to the tip of his ears. Izuku wonders if Aizawa knows what's going on. He's probably the smartest deity in the Olympus. He must know something's going on. "Alright, I think it's enough for today," Aizawa mumbles, looking from Izuku to Katsuki. "Aizawa is training you now?" The blonde god asks, a little bit surprised. "But, are you alright, Izuku? What's going on?" Izuku hasn't talked to anyone about Endeavor. The other day Ida told him All Might had an argument with the other god. and said he hadn't seen All Might so angry before. He didn't know what they were arguing about, but he managed to hear All Might telling Endeavor not to get closer to Izuku again. Izuku doesn't want Katsuki to get angry on his behalf. He doesn't want to cause any more trouble. I want to be able to protect myself. He says exactly what he told his mother. Alright, but I just want you to know I'm here for you too. If you need help. Katsuki is usually proud and confident, but that day he looks particularly flustered. Izuku finds it endearing. A couple of flowers bloom around them and Katsuki notices, looking at them with curiosity. I'll leave you alone for now, but I'll come back tomorrow, Aizawa says then. Izuku nods, making the vines go back to the ground as his cheeks turn slightly pink again. Katsuki takes one of his hands and stares into his eyes with a soft smile. His cheeks are pink too. I missed you, Izuku. Izuku can't help but jump into his arms. He pulls him close to give him a hug and realizes that his crush on him is getting worse. And yet he doesn't let go of him. Spending time with his Katsuki is one of his favorite things in the world. Izuku loves to have the god in his field, even if it's just for a while. I brought you something, Izuku, Katsuki whispers, looking slightly flustered again. The demigod wants to tell him that there's no need to bring him stuff. His company is more than enough to make Izuku happy, but he also can tell that giving him gifts is important to Katsuki for some reason. Here, Izuku gasps. The dress Katsuki is holding is not only beautiful, it looks like it belongs to a queen. Are you sure? He blushes again, taking the dress and looking at it closely. You don't like it? Katsuki looks worried now and a little bit sad. Sorry, No. Izuku pulls it closer to his chest before Katsuki can take it away. I love it. What I meant is, isn't it too much? For someone like me? The king of the underworld doesn't let him finish. He cradles Izuku's face in his hands and looks back at him like he's the most precious thing in the world. You deserve everything you could possibly want, Izuku. The green-haired demigod notices that he's tearing up, but it's too late to stop it now. This is not fair. How is he going to see Katsuki just as a friend if he keeps saying things like that? You're such a crybaby. Katsuki grins, wiping Izuku's tears off with his thumbs. This is your fault. Izuku smiles back. You say the sweetest things. Katsuki turns slightly pink then, and Izuku is glad he's not the only one flustered for once. I say ridiculous shit all the time because I love you. I can't help it. Both of them freeze at Katsuki's words. Izuku has to pinch himself in order to make sure he's not dreaming. Shit. I'm sorry, Izuku. I was planning to confess my feelings for you in a different way. I wanted it to be perfect, damn it. And I wanted to make sure you felt the same. It's alright if you don't? Without realizing what he's doing, Izuku pulls Katsuki into his arms and presses their lips together. It's a very quick kiss that lasts a couple of seconds because Izuku panics, mostly because Katsuki doesn't move at all. I'm sorry, Kaken. I should have asked you first. Face completely red, Katsuki shakes his head and blinks a couple of times. A wide smile quirks the corners of his lips up and it makes him look like he's absolutely happy. You don't have to ask, Izuku. Really? But you don't have to either? Nice, because I wasn't going to. Katsuki grabs Izuku by the waist to pull him close again. The demigod barely has time to gasp and blink when a strong hand grabs him by the chin and makes him look up. That's when Katsuki kisses him. The hand on his chin moves away quickly and grabs the back of his head for better control. Izuku sighs into the kiss, almost in surrender, right before Katsuki begins to move his lips against his. He's a hungry kisser. It's almost like he needs to taste every corner of Izuku's lips before his tongue pushes inside his mouth. He really doesn't mean to moan like that, but he does, much to his embarrassment, although he can feel Katsuki's smirk against his lips as soon as he hears it and only encourages him to keep kissing Izuku. Katsuki's fingers slide down Izuku's bare back and the mere contact of his fingertips sends shivers through his spine. I love you so much, Izuku, the god whispers, lips finally moving away before he presses them against the demigod's cheek. Kaken. His face is still burning and he's not completely sure what he wants to say now. The lips over his skin are very distracting. When they find his neck, Izuku closes his eyes and sighs happily. He hopes Katsuki doesn't leave a mark. I've always wanted to kiss the freckles on your shoulders, Katsuki confesses in a whisper. I'm pretty sure I have dreamed about it. And he does just that, and Izuku is glad he always uses dresses that leave them exposed. When the fingers on his waist press harder and Katsuki tries to pull him even closer, Izuku suddenly remembers that they are in the middle of his field. So he pushes Katsuki away, gently, but the king of the underworld still pouts at him. What are we going to do now? I've been trying to court you for a while now, Izuku, Katsuki mumbles, and then he gets slightly surprised when he notices a lot of flowers in bloom around them. Did you do this? Izuku nods, cheeks turning slightly pink, looking away from Katsuki. The god makes him look back and smirks almost triumphantly. Even before he says anything, Izuku knows he has finally realized what's going on. Is this because of me? He can't even hide how pleased he is with the situation. He looks full of himself. Izuku nods and Katsuki puts both arms around him, lifting him from the ground as he embraces him. He looks so happy about it. I want you to become my queen, Katsuki whispers, pressing their foreheads together. But I know you'll need time to think, so can I keep courting you? Officially this time? Izuku beams at him. Even though he's worried about what will change in his life when they get married, he can't help but feel excited about being courted by the one he loves. Yes. Katsuki kisses him again and pouts when Izuku pushes him away and reminds him they both have a lot of things to do. We have to tell everyone, Katsuki says. It seems it's very important to him that everyone knows for some reason. I'll let my mom and my friends know first, Izuku says, hoping his mom approves of it. Then we have to talk to Aizawa and All Might, Katsuki adds, although he doesn't look very enthusiastic about it. Izuku wonders why. Those two have been nothing but kind to him. He's sure they'll be happy for him as well as his friends. He can't wait to tell Uraraka and Todoroki about it. The conversation with his mother is not easy, mostly because he has to explain he's now being courted by the same god that kept him in the underworld for a while. But Izuku is honest about what he feels and explains the whole story to his mother and how sorry Katsuki was afterwards. After a while, a couple of bread with cheese and a nice cup of tea, Inko rises from her seat and hugs Izuku. I trust your judgment, but you have to bring him here. I'd like to meet him. He immediately agrees, and much to his relief it seems like his mother is willing to give Katsuki a chance. For a moment, he thinks he'll get to tell Aizawa first, because he's there almost every day to train Izuku, but Uraraka ends up paying a visit to him that very evening. His friend guesses it almost right away. Izuku can't see himself, but Uraraka notices the soft blush on his cheeks, the glimmer in his emerald eyes, the smile that lights up his whole face, and she knows this has to be about love. When he finally tells her, she sighs, but she manages to smile at him after a couple of seconds. I'm happy for you, I truly am, she says then. Because it was clear for a while that you were in love with him, and even though I didn't like what he did, he must be actually nice if you talk about him like that. Uraraka relaxes after a while and asks Izuku about the kiss, teasing him a bit when he turns completely red. Then they talk about Izuku's training and what happened with Endeavor because she had no idea. Izuku hadn't seen her in a while. Please don't tell anyone about that, I don't want to cause any more problems. Don't worry, my lips are sealed, she promises with a kind smile. Although I think Todoroki deserves to know how awful his father truly is. I'm sure he already knows that without me telling him what happened, Izuku argues back, prompting Uraraka to chuckle. Yeah, you're probably right. Based on what Todoroki has said, his father is awful most of the time. She looks away for a moment right before sitting under a tree. Izuku sits next to her. She looks quite tense again. Have you told Todoroki about the courtship? Not yet, but as soon as I see... Wait. Uraraka cuts him off, looking concerned. Maybe you should wait a little bit. You need to think about how to prepare him for the news. This will be painful for him. But what do you mean? Seriously, Izuku? Uraraka rolls her eyes before pinching the bridge of her nose. I mean, I know Todoroki doesn't like Kaken, but he promised to at least be civil around him from now on, he mumbles, still confused about his friend's reaction. I know he won't like the idea of Kaken courting me, but I don't think it'd be painful for him. That sounds a bit extreme. Uraraka's lips part on their own as if a few words wanted to escape from them, but she closes her mouth quickly before shaking her head. Please wait and try to think about how to tell him kindly, alright? Izuku nods and she manages to relax somewhat, although the concern is still clearly written all over her face. She's probably overreacting. Todoroki will eventually understand after Izuku explains to him how he feels about Katsuki. Before he can think about what he's going to tell Todoroki, Aizawa appears for Izuku's daily training. I think it's time to take you to the Olympus. Toshinori wants to train you too? Izuku can't stop himself from beaming. Aizawa had told him that All Might wanted to train him, but it was difficult for him to believe it at the time. Well, it still is. However, it's a good thing that he's going to the Olympus because that way he can tell them both at the same time about the courtship. He goes home quickly to say goodbye to his mother and promise her to be back at night. The Olympus looks a little bit empty now that there's no party, but it's still very impressive and beautiful to look at. There's some sort of garden with a golden apple tree in the middle of it all. Izuku can't help but stare at everything and notice how much life is in every inch of it. He can feel it everywhere. Midoriya. All Might is very different from Aizawa. He greets Izuku like they have known each other for ages and hugs him in such an enthusiastic way Izuku's feet stop touching the ground for a moment. You're going to crush him. Aizawa scolds the other god after a while, although Izuku feels completely fine. It's a pleasure to see you again. The demigod beams, slightly flustered. Are you ready to test your power against me? All Might grins, posing like one of those statues the mortals have on. His temples, he flexes his arms, showing off his muscles. Izuku gets immediately nervous. He doesn't think he's ready to test his abilities against the king of the gods. Aizawa rolls his eyes before standing in the middle of the two. Oh, there's not going to be any of that, we agreed. Aizawa sighs, looking like he's about to have a headache. First, you're going to watch him train on his own so you can see his progress so far. The fact that he's going to be aware of them watching him makes Izuku feel even more nervous, but he tries to focus. He needs to know what kind of life grows in that garden. The plants and flowers are not used to Izuku's presence, but they welcome him anyway. Izuku is not sure if it's because he has had a lot of practice or it's that life is buzzing with energy there, but it's easier to control. He manages to catch Aizawa once with vines, although he makes sure not to use thorns. All Might puts a hand under his own chin and just as Izuku waits for him to point out everything he's doing wrong, he smiles and claps his hands together once. Let's eat. If he doesn't count that time at the party and when he was in the Underworld, Izuku is almost sure he has never seen that much food on a table before. Gods don't need to eat, but they still enjoy the taste of food. That's why a lot of the offerings mortals made to them are meat, grapes, and sometimes wine and juice they make with their own hands. You have done an amazing job with the boy, Shota, All Might says after a while, making Izuku relax somewhat. However, when he turns around to face the demigod, he looks slightly more serious. Even though you are obviously working on your technique and have better control over it, you still hesitate a lot, Midoriya. Izuku turns slightly pink before looking down. He knows he's right. Don't be afraid of your own power, young Midoriya. I promise it won't betray you or consume you like you seem to believe. Aizawa quirks a brow at the other god, almost as if he's quite surprised by his wisdom. And don't hesitate to use it on Shota. All Might chuckles before giving the other god a slap on the shoulder that almost makes him fall face first over his own plate. He can take it. Aizawa glares back at the blonde god, but when he turns around to look at Izuku, his expression softens considerably. He's right. You shouldn't hesitate. Let's go back to training. Wait, Izuku cuts in, looking at both of them. I need to tell you something first. He gets slightly nervous when he notices Aizawa's worried expression and All Might's excited grin. Kaken is courting me. Izuku blurts out, knowing that if he doesn't say it as soon as possible he never will. What? All Might doesn't seem that happy about it. But you're too young for that. Even though the god doesn't seem to agree with that, Izuku worries a bit more about Aizawa's eye twitching. He hasn't said a word, but it seems that whatever he's thinking is definitely nothing good. Maybe he should have waited a little longer to tell them. It's been a while and Aizawa is still pacing around the room. Izuku is not sure why he doesn't seem to like the idea of Katsuki courting him. It's okay. All Might says then he's not completely happy, but it seems he has come to terms with it. I mean, young Bakugo is not bad. He doesn't like to come here often, but I know he takes care of his realm and the people in it quite well. Izuku is ready to agree and tell him how kind and gentle Katsuki actually is, but he realizes that All Might is talking to Aizawa. The other god pauses, pinches the bridge of his nose and takes a deep breath before looking back at him. I know, Aizawa sighs. I don't have anything against Bakugo and he seems to have learned his lesson after what happened the first time, but you don't want Midoriya to suffer because you care about him, All Might says, surprising Izuku. I care about him too. The demigod feels the tears in his eyes before they start sliding down and he realizes he can't stop them. Izuku already knew they cared about him, they wouldn't be there at the moment if that wasn't the case, but now he thinks that he doesn't quite understand how much they care. A couple of years ago, Izuku firmly believed that his mother was the only one who could care about him like that. It seems he was completely wrong and he's never been happier to be wrong before. He jumps into Aizawa's arms first, but this time the god immediately hugs him back. You still have to bring Bakugo here because I want to talk to him, alright? He says after a while. Sure. Izuku beams before giving another hug to All Might. Actually, Aizawa adds, almost like an afterthought. I think it'd be better if he meets us in your mother's house in a couple of days, if your mother is okay with it. Izuku nods, knowing his mother will agree. Great. All Might cuts in, cracking his knuckles. I have a couple of things to say to young Bakugo too. Even though they kinda said they're okay with the courtship, Izuku gets slightly nervous about the upcoming meeting, but he doesn't have time to think about it too much because Aizawa puts a hand on his shoulder. You still have to train, Midoriya. It's time you use your powers on Toshinori. Another thing to be nervous about. At least it takes his head off the courtship for a while. Then he realizes that he's not a good opponent for All Might. The god defeats him every single time without breaking a sweat. It's going to be a long day.